Recording.
Hello, Ewan. How are you?
I'm all right, Colin. You?
I'm very well. Good to see you. How's LA treating you?
Very well, yeah. Very nice here. Yeah, it's all very nice here. So this is interesting. It'll be an interesting experience doing a virtual air display, air show.
Yeah, an armchair air show. I think it's a really good idea.
Aerobility exists to help disabled people change their lives through the magic of flight. Whatever the disability, whether it's a young person with autism or a wounded soldier, perhaps somebody with Alzheimer's even, or an acquired disability or medical condition, we give everybody the chance to participate and to fly with our specially adapted aircraft and equipment such as the hoist, which can safely lift somebody into the pilot seat to take the controls for the first time.
You know, the one thing that's fantastic about Aerobility is the way that there is no difference between people who are disabled and those that are non-disabled.
When I'm up there, just another voice on the radio, and that's all I want to be, just another voice. And Aerobility has enabled that completely.
They gave me that purpose back, they gave me that sense of worth again, and for that I'm forever thankful.
Time is tough for everybody right now, but if you can help, please do. Through your support, we can continue to change lives and support disabled people through the magic of flight. Thank you.
I am happier.
I am more confident.
I am feeling positive about my life.
Thanks to Aerobility.
And thank you to you. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Miller-Smith, and I'm the Chief Executive of Aerobility, the disabled flying charity. Thank you so much for joining us for this unseen footage episode. Thanks to the overwhelming support from the world of flying and the aviation industry, we've had just so much footage. So the original event we had on the 20th of June. So it's great stuff. It's going to be just as good as last time. So it's great that we can cram it all into this follow-up show, which is just going to be just great. So settle in and let's get ready to take to the skies once again from our chairs. But just before we go and get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors and supporters. Our lead sponsor, Aerobites, of course, Breitling, the Naismith Group, Hayward Aviation, NATS, London Biggin Hill Airport, Farnborough International Airshow, Singleton PR and Wonderland WPA. This show wouldn't be possible without them, and neither would the work that we do supporting thousands of disabled people every year. So without further ado, let's get the show underway.
Fantastic. Welcome, Mike, and hello, everybody. My name's Ian. I'm going to be trying to guide us through the day. We've brought together all of the bits that we didn't get a chance to see last time. And Mike, thank you for getting us involved again and bringing the team together.
You're welcome. It's well, what a great opportunity. We had so much great stuff. It would have been an absolute crime not to do a second show, which is perhaps even better than the first one.
Absolutely. I think you summed it up really well in the meetings we've had this week when we got the running order together. Looked something like this. We thought that would have done for the first time round, wouldn't it? There's so much quality stuff there. We've got coming up very shortly. We've got Mike Ling and John Bond talking us through a bit more Red Arrows material. Later on, I'm really looking forward to Jetman Dubai, vertical takeoff, 4 jet engines strapped to your back. That sounds like fun to me. We've got all sorts coming up through the day. So, what have we got first? I think probably first we'll take a look at the lottery that I know you're running, which is why we're all here, isn't it? Trying to generate a bit of revenue for a charity in a bit of an odd situation at the moment. Let's take a look at what that's about. Awesome stuff. Pretty unique opportunity there. Now, you'll see I've been joined by Mike Lee. Mike, welcome.
Hello, Ian, and hello, everybody.
How's it going? Now, tell us who we've got to talk to today.
Well, those who were watching the Armchair Airshow on the 20th of June will remember that we had a few technical issues with the network, which meant we completely lost the stream towards the end of the show at the crucial moment where I was talking to the current leader of the Red Arrows, Squad Leader Martin Pert, and the leader of the Synchro pair, who is Red 6 Flight Lieutenant John Bond. Now, a lot of the comments that came out during that live stream were the fact that it froze just as Bondy, John Bond, was about to give us his highlights. So we're going to bring John in again and just have a chat with him about what he's been up to this week and what he's been up to in his time in the Red Arrows. So hello, John Bond. Bondy, how are you?
Hello, Lee. Yeah, very well, thank you.
Thanks for coming back to join us. Yeah, a lot of the banter that was happening, there were a lot of comments that came out about when we lost you before. It froze just as you were talking to us, and it would appear you're a bit of a lady's favourite, I have to say, mate. There were a lot of the ladies were very disappointed that they couldn't hear what you had to say.
Or the ugly face broke the stream, one of the two. But,
there was a comment that it said one man's face broke the internet, which I thought was very good.
Well, it's good to be back. Good to be back.
No,
hopefully I won't break it this time.
Thanks for coming back, Bonnie. Now, the question I asked was about your number one highlight of the Red Arrows. I think you're about to say the highlight was when you flew opposite me in 2018, when you were Red 2 and I was Red 3. I think that was what you were about to say, wasn't it?
Do you know what? It was very, very close. You were flying next to me. I was about to say there were so many. Obviously, the North America tour was full of highlights, and it's actually very difficult to pick one out of all the fantastic fly paths we did. But I think the thing that stands out for me, there's nothing better than flying over your own capital city, and I think the RF 100 fly pass that we did together in 2018 was, I think, probably the most the special moment yet in my Red Arrows career. So the answer was going to be flying down the mile, RF 100, obviously with you, Lingy, and yeah, I think that will remain probably the highlight so far. And fingers crossed there'll be more to come.
Well, I was going to ask you what you've been doing this week. Now you just talked about flying over capital cities, but what happened this week when you were out and about?
Well, we had a busy week this week, actually. Saturday, so the weekend, we were over Scarborough for Armed Forces Day, then went across to North Yorkshire, Leamy and Catterick, a couple of fly paths there, battling some pretty rubbish weather, actually, for June. And then this week, obviously, we're in the run-up to trying to get our public display authority, so when required, we can come and display again. So it's ramped up this week. It's key for us, and especially the back section, to go and display off-site. So it's all very well getting used to the Scampton runway, but as we do in Greece and Cyprus, we go across and practice at different seaside sites and airfield sites. So it's vital that we build up a skills and add to our repertoire of being able to just take the show anywhere and perform it anywhere. So we've been doing that this week. We went to Syston on Tuesday, and we got 2 shows in there. And then we went to Donanook, performed for the SEALs on Friday, which was great. And that was so much learning took place there for everyone. And we put on a couple of decent shows, actually. So fingers crossed for the next couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll get big tick and be able to ready to go whenever required.
You make a good point there about practicing in different places. Now, of course, in a normal year, the majority of the Red Arrows displays, or a fair majority, would be over the sea, so at seaside sites. Now, can you just tell the audience what are the specific hazards that might be involved? Why do you go to Donanook to train over the sea before you go and display to the public over the sea? What are the hazards that are linked?
Well, there's 2 things. There's firstly the atmospheric. So we're talking about visibility, horizons, and unfortunately the sky on the northeast coast is not particularly bright, and it can blend in. And Friday was a great example when we had a reasonably high cloud base, but it was lowering down to the horizon, and the horizon was actually pretty unclear. So for us, especially as synchro, we have to be very careful that we don't pick off on false horizons and end up in a very insidious descent. So for us to practice that was great, because the sky looked the same colour as the sea. And that's really good. And unfortunately, that's what you get most of the time in the UK, even in summer. So that was great training. Obviously, if there's no wind, there's quite a lot of wind on Friday, so we didn't get this phenomenon, but we get this a lot in Greece. We get a very flat sea, and that can bring you down really low. So that's good to practice as well, just so you don't, when you go to the site for the first display that, right, we know, we pre-brief that there's going to be a flat sea. It might want to draw us in lower. So we need to be aware of that. But also the biggest thing, and especially for synchro, is trying to judge where to, we call it elbow, our cross points to end up down the line in the middle of the crowd line. It's great at Scampton. We've got a big wood on the crowd right end, and we've got a road on the crowd left end. So we know when we're coming down from maybe Jippo break or something, we can point it there. If we elbow then to go down the line, we know that if we're flying the right speeds, etc., we're going to meet in the middle. Unfortunately, over the beach, there's not a lot of good features. It's just a lot of sand. So we use things called wave technique. So effectively, we pick a wave to point at to enable us to fly accurately to what we call our cross points. And we do a lot of interpolating from features along the coast. We draw a line out from, say, a little brook, so a bridge over a river, draw a line to the 230-meter line, and then go, right, that bit of sand is pretty much where we need to point. So all of that training, especially for Red 7, who hadn't had the luxury of doing it last year. I did it last year as Red 7. So it's teaching Red 7 those techniques as well. And it's absolutely vital that we do that before we go and take it off-site in front of the public. So fantastic training for us.
Well, that's a key point, is that normally you would go to Greece and do all that over the sea training. Now, you've not had that opportunity this year just due to the travel restrictions. So going to Nook, which is a weapons range on the east coast of Lincolnshire, just gives you that opportunity. It just gives the audience now that when they go and watch a display at the seaside in the summer, they can go and see how much goes into it. It's not just about just going up there for the first time and doing it. You've trained and you've done a lot of practice, and that gives the audience a good idea about what you've been through. So thank you for that, Bondi. That's a really good insight. Now, we are going to not get so far behind as we did last time that we can't fit everything in. So I'm going to ask one last question, and then we're going to let you go and enjoy your Sunday afternoon, Bondi. Now, this is an often asked question, and it has come in from a viewer this afternoon. What is the best thing about being a Red Arrows pilot?
Oh, that's a tricky one. The best thing, I think it's being able to put out the red, white and blue in front of thousands of people, be it either at Nook or, in America or Bournemouth Beach, anywhere. I think it's being able to have the opportunity to be able to perform, display the best of British, fly the flag, put out the smoke, and showcase, the best of British, the best of our military. And it's a real privilege to be able to have the opportunity to do that. So I think that is always in the back of our minds whenever we put on display that, it's not a given, this job, and we're very lucky, although we love doing what we're doing, and as a day job it's not too bad, but it is a real privilege to be able to represent the UK in front of so many people.
Here. Well, Bondi, thank you for that. That's definitely, and obviously the nation is proud of the team. I was very proud to have worn a red suit. I know every time you zip one on, it's an incredibly proud moment, and long may it continue. But John Bond, Red 6, thank you very much. Good luck with PDA when it happens, and good luck with the abridged display season. I hope to get to see you in the summer. Bondi, take care.
Thanks, Lee. See ya. Bye-bye.
Thanks. So there we go. That was picking up with Flight Lieutenant John Bond from the Red Arrows, the current Red 6 synchro leader, who's just given an idea, some of his highlights of being in the team. Now, you're watching this show today. It's brought to you free by the British disabled flying charity Aerobility. Aerobility changes lives by offering anyone with any disability access to aviation. By learning to fly, those that the charity supports can go on to ask themselves, if they can fly a plane, what else can they do? Well, you could change lives too with a donation to Aerobility. All you have to do is pick up your mobile phone, text FLY5 to 70490. That donates £5. Text cost that amount plus the standard network rate. You will be opting to hear more about the charity and their fundraising via the telephone and the text system. If you'd like to opt out of that, text FLY no info to the same number, 70490. Fly no info 5 will just text donate £5. If you want to donate any amount between £1 and £20, then it's fly or fly no info followed by 1 to 20. So fly no info 20 would be a £20 donation with no info. I hope that makes sense. Remember, it's 70490 and text FLY. Or Fly 5 to donate £5. Fly on its own will donate £10. So there we go. That's a bit of information about the charity. Now, Bondi came on to talk to us about his highlights. I was very fortunate before the last show to have a rather large gathering with some former Red Arrows pilots. I managed to go through my little black book and I got 30 to come on to Zoom, and we had a Sunday afternoon chat about their time in the team. I was very fortunate to have 30 of them, so including myself, there were 31. The call actually went on for an hour and a half. Now, of course, it wouldn't be possible to show you the entire conversation, but at some point we may be able to release that. But for now, what I thought I'd do, I thought I'd edit it down to about 5 minutes, where I got 30 of them to come on and just talk about being in the team, about 10 seconds each, giving us their highlights. We start with a founding member of the team, who was Henry Prince. He was in the team when it first formed back in the mid-1960s. I didn't quite get a highlight from him, but those who saw the show live on the 20th of June would have heard him talking about how their team was formed. But we start with Henry, and then we rapidly roll on chronologically right up to a member who's currently in the team. So sit back and have a listen to the Red Arrows that have gone before us and their highlights.
With them in 1965, but obviously flew with the Yellow Jacks before that. Really, as number 7.
And of course, when you're on the team, you have an awful lot of exciting moments, not only in the air, but on the ground, and some wonderful moments, and go to wonderful places.
2 and 3. The last 6 weeks of my tenure was a 6-week tour to the States, of which I have very, very fond memories.
Like Aid, I think the highlight of my time was the America tour of '93. That was an outstanding time, and actually watching the TV program recently brought back a lot of memories of things we went through.
And the highlights of my Red Arrows tour was the 2 Far East tours to Langkawi.
Was invited to stay on as 10 for 2001, which I really enjoyed. Yes. It was almost as much fun as flying in the team.
Displaying over my hometown, 3 years, beautiful weather down in Dartmouth when we were still allowed to display down there. Also flying on Concorde's wing up for, I think it was the Scottish Parliament. That was pretty special as well.
But probably we took the team across when I was the leader across to the States. Initially we did some displays in Quebec and Canada, and then went down to New York.
Our season of following Concorde down the Mall for the Queen's Golden Jubilee, which, as with Cutty flying over Scotland earlier on in his time with the team, was an amazing highlight.
We did Concorde as well. That was Golden Jubilee for Her Majesty, so that was awesome down the Mall. I think that was the last time the Reds flew with Concorde.
2002, flying down the Mall on Concorde wing. So rather than looking at the boss, JG and I were trying to work out the references on Concorde, which was quite difficult. The tour out to the Far East, going to Langkawi and displaying out there was quite something. And DT, I've got exactly the same highlight as you were displaying at the pyramids was quite something.
Was just seeing the reaction of the team getting 12 serviceable airplanes in China, I think, after 8 months of stuff to make that work.
And also 2014 was the 50th display season, so it was amazing being the leader for that. Somehow we got through it despite lots and lots of bird strikes. Thank you.
New York was a particular highlight, but also an incredible amount of work trying to get a military jet display into the heart of New York, where no other jet team had done a full display. So
our highlights of flying career so far definitely have to be the Reds. I've thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it. So great to see so many faces here. And
some of the highlights actually in that second tour, getting to jump in the backseat with the guys, because you got the beauty of moving around the formation a bit more and actually enjoying the display in some of those iconic sites.
Flying experiences are just unrivaled. You won't get them anywhere else. And I haven't had them since. Very special.
Monaco, absolutely brilliant. Sort of descending off the high ground into the Bay of Monaco, which was great.
At the Olympics, the planning, being involved with that to fly it itself was amazing. It was probably the best battle formation I'd ever seen in 4 years. It was such a sweet spot, and I think the mood of all the cloud and everything, and the whole of London just flashing cameras in Victoria Park, Hyde Park. That was
I think the most impressionable bit for me was that September that we had in 2009, because it was probably the most entries I put into a logbook. It was just so busy. We covered so many areas.
I remember my very first display at Bryce Norton's Family's Day.
and the feeling of running in from crowd rear over the crowd line, and my heart was literally in my mouth. And
highlight for me overall really was just serving with everyone that was very like-minded, having a great time with not only your colleagues but your friends, flying some pretty awesome places. But
meeting the Queen in 2013 at Windsor Castle, and then displaying for her at Marham was absolutely amazing.
Well, it's one of my most fond memories of being on the team. It was the annual Springhawk detachment to Cyprus, where we deployed to Cyprus to the nice weather for 2 or 3 months.
2014, it was the 50th display season of the Reds, so it just really highlighted what a national icon the team is, and the reception that we got in that year around pretty much every air show we went to.
It's been a huge privilege, clearly, to be a Red, to wear that red suit. The highlights for me were 2013. The Middle East tour, the camaraderie throughout, and that is something that I don't think I will ever be part of again, and something that I sorely miss. And as I listen to everybody's stories, and it reminds me of my own 3 years, it makes me smile every time.
Was the 100th anniversary fly past down the Mall, and as Bertie mentioned there before, just that moment of, we got to quick look out the front and just see all those Typhoons spelling out 100 in front of us, and knowing that we were finishing off 100 aircraft fly past, that was huge.
You were just rocking into Miramar as a 12 ship. I've been on exchange over there before, had a lot of friends there, so rocking into the Miramar circuit as a 12 ball, jumping out to say hi to some old friends, that was phenomenal.
So there we go. Just a very short snippets of each person who came on to speak to us about their time in the team. As I said before, the actual call went on for an hour and a half. I can't show everything today, but I'll give you an idea of the flavour of what people enjoyed and how much they appreciated their time in the team. And it definitely was a privilege to talk to those guys. 30 of them came on, as I said, and we had a great catch up. There was a lot of banter and a lot of memories were stirred by everybody. So we had one person from every decade that the team has existed, which was a real honour to have them on and talk to us on behalf of this fantastic charity. So a highlight for me, both as Red 10 and as a Red Arrows pilot, was mixed formation. Now, you heard in the call there that quite a common thread was that people who flew on Concorde's wing, it was their highlight. Now, for me, it's one thing I wish I could have done as a Red Arrows pilot. I flew with the Vulcan, lots of airliners, lots of Warbirds, but look at this footage. I mean, to fly on such an amazing, amazing aeroplane. This was for Her Majesty's Golden Jubilee in 2002, just after Concorde had become airworthy again. And what a true example of Britishness. The red, white and blue of the Red Arrows on the wing of such a majestic and iconic aeroplane. And this pull up here, when you see the smoke go off and Concorde pulls up to then leave the Red Arrows behind. And then the pilots went and landed at Heathrow. I think they were on a job to go to New York about an hour later. So just stunning footage. And as you heard, it was a real highlight for those who managed to do it. Sadly, I didn't get to do it. Who knows? Maybe again in the future we can see that incredible supersonic aeroplane flying again. I mentioned just now about flying with Warbirds. So mixed formation was a big thing in the Red Arrows, and flying with Warbirds was definitely one thing that was always very special, whether it was to celebrate an anniversary of the Battle of Britain or just to highlight something else that was happening in the country. So there was one event that took place in 2015, which was with the Eagle Squadron, and that was at Duxford. Now, I caught up with the pilot who led the formation of 4 Warbirds at Duxford, and that was Mr. Paul Bonham. And I think we've got some footage now of the fly past. Now, Paul, you've had a couple of experiences of flying a Warbird behind the Red Arrows. The first was with MH434, Ray Hanna's Spitfire, so a founding member of the Red Arrows, and then he displayed his beloved MH434. You then flew it in formation at Biggin Hill, and I know you told me afterwards how good an experience it was. And then you got to lead the Eagle Squadron flying a Hurricane with the Red Arrows. Just tell us about that experience.
But my memory of that day was being in a Hurricane with a P-47, a Spitfire and a Mustang around me, and going past Cambridge Airport as we were going to the rendezvous point, looking down and seeing the runway at Cambridge covered in red aeroplanes, and just thinking, we're going to meet those guys over Bury St Edmunds. And it was just, for me, one of those amazing moments. I can't tell you what I was thinking at the time because you wouldn't repeat it on the TV, but it was one of those just moments in my aviation career where I thought, this is phenomenal.
No, and I remember seeing you on the ground and the beaming smile you had, and it was a pleasure to have you in the Eagle Squadron, and of course with MH434 beforehand. So that was Paul talking about one of his very special moments. Now, Paul's done an awful lot of things as a pilot in his career. whether it's flying aerobatics, leading the Red Bull Matadors display team, but he's most known for being a pilot with the Red Bull Air Race. Now, you may have seen on the screen during that last segment, there was another chap with Paul. Now, that's Steve Jones. Now, Steve and Paul were around when the Red Bull Air Race first started, the world's fastest motorsport. Unfortunately, the series finished last year when Red Bull decided that they weren't going to continue with it. But I was very lucky to have 3 of the British racers join me on a call. So I had Steve Jones, one of the founding participants in the series, Paul Bonham, who was in fact 3 times world champion in the air race. And eventually I was then joined by Ben Murphy, who is the latest Brit to join the team. So I caught up with them and listened into the interview I had with them a couple of weeks ago. I'd like to start with Steve and Paul. Steve, can I ask you, how did this concept of flying aeroplanes through inflatable pylons come about?
Well, I think it was Peter Bessanier, the Hungarian pilot who was working as a show pilot for Red Bull. He contacted Paul and I because we knew him from some Far East stuff we'd been doing, and said, "Hey, look, guys, do you want to get involved in this new crazy idea that Red Bull have got?" And we said, "Yeah, sounds great." And literally, that's how it started. And I would imagine Paul's recollections are something similar.
And Paul, you were both aerobatic champions by that point. How easy was it to go from being aerobatic champions to flying in between these inflatable things?
Well, firstly, Steve was the aerobatic champion. I was just one of these sort of glory boys that went and did the airshow circuit, and we'd won a few airshow type competitions in the Far East. But for me, it was fantastic, and it really was a run what you brung. You know, everybody just looked in the hangar. What have we got in the hangar? Steve and I had Sukhoi 26s, which, you know, are just so unsuitable for racing. But nevertheless, we took them along and just got involved. And it was the Wild West to start with. It was utter madness. And some of the rules, when you look back now, you just think that's unbelievably stupid to do those things. But it was the start of something just pretty phenomenal.
But I was really involved in the training side of it. I mean, the classic example is flying under a bridge. The race in Budapest, you know, the start line's under the chain bridge there. So, you know, when you walk into a room and say, "Guys, who hasn't flown under a bridge before?" And 1 or 2 people put their hands up. And then somehow you've got to sort of prepare them for racing an airplane against the clock under a bridge.
For me, the amazing bit was the transformation from a run what you had in the garage type of event to a super professional competition, and that was all down to teamwork. You know, you've got to have the best team in the world if you want to win.
Now, you talk about the evolution there. Now, we've actually got with us the newest comer, the newest Brit comer to the sport, who is the head of the Blades racing team. That is Ben Murphy. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Lingy. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, so you are the newest British pilot in the sport. Tell us about how you got into it and how you come into the masterclass that you are today.
Yeah, we'll talk about big shoes to fill, certainly with these 2 esteemed gentlemen on the call as well. But I'd echo Paul's point really, and Steve's point that, you know, the air race as it is now is a very, very different beast to how it was back then, and that cascades all the way down. So my own involvement wasn't just pulling out what we had in the hangar and jumping in it and go flying. There is now a very measured approach to getting involved and getting to compete at that highest level. My background is not the typical one, I would say, to most of the other guys in the air race, in that clearly I came from a military background all the way up until the point really where I started air racing. So. But there's a lot of transferable skills and experiences from that, you know, flying in low, close to the ground, and flying in front of big crowds, media, with all of those extra pressures. But my own approach was, like I said, a tempered one. I didn't just jump straight into the masterclass and go. I did 2 years in the Challenger class under Steve's tutelage. And, you know, even to get to that stage was a very measured, you know, sort of interview process, experience, training camps, qualification camps, all of the other additional training that goes before you even get anywhere near a race. And I was lucky enough to do 2 years in the Challenger class, and then got the opportunity to move up to the masterclass, and did 2 years before, unfortunately, Red Bull pulled out of the series. But thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it, and I think it's fair to say that, as Paul said, it's now such a professional outfit that it doesn't matter what experience you've brought to it. You're always learning something, and you're always, pushing the boundaries. And I was one of the people in Steve's classroom who put his hand up and said, "Actually, no, I haven't flown under a bridge. I've done over 4,500 hours of flying, but if I'd attempted to do that, I would have been arrested." But now you're in this environment where, that is that's the norm. That's how you start a race. You fly under a bridge, and then you ease up to go into the track. It's an immensely rewarding and challenging environment, and loved every minute of it.
You've had the opportunity to celebrate on the podium. You know what it feels like to be on the podium. Hopefully, one day in the future, you'll have the opportunity to have the same feeling Paul had when he won the World Championship. Unfortunately, Red Bull stopped the series. But what is the future of air racing?
Well, I'd like to say it's bright. I mean, the great thing about the popularity of the sport is evident. The fans loved it. The sense of drama and occasion around each race weekend was undeniable. And it's a motorsport that is completely unique. So there's definitely the appetite for it to continue. We're lucky enough in that there is a new series organizer that's stepped in to pick up the series where Red Bull left off. We're hopeful it's going to start up next year, similar sort of format to how Red Bull ran it. That's definitely the intention is to get racing again. So whilst the race plane's in the hangar at the moment, I'm hoping it's not too long before we can dust her off and get her flying again and get back racing. So very positive, really looking forward to it. And it's just great to see that there is an avenue forward so that we can keep developing this sport, opening it up to more people, both fans and pilots to participate in, and take it to greater new heights, if you excuse the pun.
Oh, fantastic. That is great news for people who are fans of the sport. And, I'd quite like to have a go myself, if I'm honest. But, guys, thank you very much for coming on and talking to us. I've thoroughly enjoyed the air racing that's happened over the years, and I do look forward to seeing it again in the future. But for now, thank you very much, and it'll be good to see you all soon.
Cheers, Lee.
A very enjoyable chat with a Red Bull Air Race World Champion, and fingers crossed in Ben Murphy, a future World Champion at this new World Championship Air Race, which should come to your screens very soon. I very much look forward to watching that. Now, those who recognised Steve Jones and Paul Bonham from not the air race scene, but the air display scene, would know them better as the Red Bull Matadors. Now, they are both a little bit crazy when it comes to different ideas. I then asked them what happened when they flew to a little airfield in North Wales, and they showed me this footage. Well, I've got Steve Jones and Paul Bonham here with me, who, as the Red Bull Matadors, did something that was rather crazy. We've got some footage to show you very shortly. It's just worth pointing out that Paul is still an airline captain. He's flying, and he's currently in Los Angeles, where the hotel has rather suspect internet. So you may see his screen shrinking every now and then. But Paul and Steve, this was a ridiculous idea. We're going to show the footage very shortly. I want to know first and foremost, whose idea was it to fly two aeroplanes through a hangar?
Well, I reckon it was my idea. Any pilot, every pilot has always thought they'd love to fly through a building or under a structure of some sort. So I'd always thought of that. So I reckon it was my idea. And
Paul, you're going to agree with that?
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And of course, like all of our good ideas in the Red Bull Matadors, they all start from a visit to the pub. And we never go flying after we've been to the pub. I must stress that. But yeah, they start after a nice gentle beer. That we always come up with our best ideas. And then the fact is, on a nice clear day when we've got clear heads, we make sure we can do it safely. But great idea. And I generally say yes to anything that Jonesy suggests, and vice versa. I come up with an idea and he generally says yes as well.
That's amazing. So let's start rolling this footage then. For those who haven't seen it, Steve, where is this and what is happening?
Well, this is just about the only place we could find anywhere in the UK is a hangar at Lambeda in the top left-hand corner of Wales. It's the actually perfect venue to fly through a hangar.
Now, that hangar doesn't look very big to me, but you've got to get two aeroplanes in formation through that hangar. How big are the doors on that hangar?
I forget the actual width, but it was okay. In fact, when we were in the pub the following night, we were sort of kicking ourselves for not closing the doors a little bit more to make it more exciting. But I'm glad we didn't, I have to say. But the trick with it, really, or the thing that made it complicated was it was 75 meters long. So once you're in the hangar, you're still not out of it. So there's a little bit of flying to be done while you're doing that 75 meters.
And here we go, going through. Paul, you're leading this formation. Now, I'll just stop while it goes for slow-mo there so people can enjoy. Look how close those aircraft are to the side of that hangar.
The planning that went into that was, I think, pretty special, because what you can't see there is our thought process. Clearly, we don't actually want to hit the hangar. So we had all sorts of ideas. The CAA insisted on a risk assessment, but I can tell you, if you've got any brains, you don't need to be told to do a risk assessment. And we thought of absolutely everything from bird strikes to engine failures to cracked canopies to oil pressure loss. We had everything covered, I think, so that whatever happened, we were either going to pull up before the hangar and we actually had a no-go point where if you had an incident, an engine failure, bird strike, before that point you pulled up. After that point, you still went through the hangar because we thought that was safer. So phenomenal planning and a perfect example of, a successful process will give you a great outcome. And it was really good fun.
Oh, I can absolutely imagine. And I think the biggest thing for me is the level of trust that must be between you two guys. You've been flying for a very long time, but the level of trust, Steve, in the video, you just see your head very briefly just looking forward. But I imagine that was to enjoy it more than just to look where you were going. You just got your eyes glued on Paul's aeroplane.
Absolutely, because this is one of the things that we looked at, really, one of the risk assessments for our own use, if you like, was that I didn't think it was a good idea to go through as a conventional wingman or purely as a conventional wingman, just concentrating on Bonham's airplane. Clearly, I trust him implicitly, but as I think it was Ronald Reagan used to say, trust but verify. So I was following Bonham, but also we know from previous experience, if Bonham's engine, for example, were to cut, he reverses out of formation more quickly than I can react to. And I didn't want to be in a position where I was suddenly having to try and get through the hangar on my own. So as you see my head moving occasionally, so that I'm just having a backup plan to make sure I can get through on my own should any, Bonham have some sort of drama. But it worked, and it was good fun. Whether we should have done it 11 times, I don't know really, but.
Is that how many times you did it?
I think it was 11, wasn't it, Bob?
Wow.
We did 3 solo passes to get our eye in, and then 11 in formation. And interestingly, at the end of it, the film crew, thank you, because I could sense the confidence going up. And the first pass was really all I was interested in was the hangar. Second pass, I started getting more comfortable. And then by the time we got to 8 or 9, it was like, yeah, this is great fun. This is normal. And that was when we said, no, actually, this is the time to stop.
That's when it starts getting dangerous. A little bit of complacency, and that, yeah, absolutely. That's it's some of the most exhilarating flying I think I've seen. I didn't realise you'd done it 11 times. I thought it was 1 or 2, but 11 times is something else. Now, Paul, you were leading it. Is it one of those things? I'm going to use the idea of air-to-air refueling, where the worst thing you can do when you're refueling in the air is look at the basket when you're trying to get the probe in. You look bigger picture. You look at the wing of the tanker airplane to get your references. Is it similar when you're flying through the door of a hangar?
It is. And Ling, from your formation flying experience, there's 2 completely different jobs. The leader's job is very different to being a wingman, but it is absolutely imperative that both of you have the big picture in mind and can keep an eye on what's going on. So as Steve said, he's looking at me, but also wants to know where the hangar is. Likewise, I'm looking at the big picture, looking at the hangar. A bit like flying under bridges in the air race, you've got to look at the bit you want to fly through. If you start looking at iron girders and brick walls and hangar doors, then that's not good. You have to look at where you want to go. But I'm also aware in my peripheral vision of what's going on my wingtip, because I don't want Steve to be uncomfortable either. So yeah, it's one of those moments where you have to say, right, there's an awful lot to concentrate on here, but I mustn't dwell on one thing. I've got to have a really good and thorough scan on everything going on.
It really is brilliant. But gentlemen, thank you. What's the latest on the Matadors? What's happening? Obviously this year difficult with the Matadors. What about the future?
We're busy actually. We've got a few little exciting projects coming up the end of this month. Can't say too much about those now, but keep an eye out on social media for those. And then we're looking forward to ramping it up for the end of this summer, and then back next year once we're hopefully back to normal activity.
And you're obviously both fitting in lots of Warbird flying and all the rest of your other hobbies and day jobs as well. So very, very great, grateful for your time, gentlemen. Thank you for coming on to talk to us.
Thank you. Cheers, Lingy.
Thank you.
What a great chat that was with some very iconic aviators in the air display world, and obviously following on from the Red Bull Aeros we talked about. But putting 2 aeroplanes through a hangar, it's not something that people do lightly. And of course, they did everything in the background with the Civil Aviation Authority to get the approval for it. So those of you who do fly aeroplanes, don't try that at home. All right. So a great bit of footage, and very grateful for their time. Now, I'm going to sign off now with a fantastic interview. I'm conscious that we haven't seen so many aeroplanes during my stint so far, but now you're going to see some incredible footage. I'm going to sign off and say farewell, but I'm going to introduce first an amazing bit of footage and an interview I did with Lieutenant Nick Smith from the Royal Navy, who did an exchange with the US Navy, who talks to us about landing an F-18 on an aircraft carrier. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Well, now I'm joined by Nick Smith, who is a Royal Naval officer. Now, Nick qualified from flying training in the Royal Navy in 2010, when unfortunately the Harrier was withdrawn from service. So he never got to fly the Harrier. But to keep some fixed-wing experience in the Royal Navy, Nick was sent to the United States Navy on secondment to go and maintain his expertise in launching and recovering to aircraft carriers. So a very good afternoon, Nick.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So how did it feel then? You finished flying training in the UK, and then you got sent straight out to the States pretty much.
Yeah, it was quite surreal. It was quite an entertaining few months. Looking back on it, at the time it was a bit stressful with a lot of uncertainty when they got rid of the Harrier. But thankfully for myself, it worked out. And before I knew it, within about a year, I was on an aeroplane and heading out to the States to go and join the US Navy for a bit.
That is amazing. And what training did the Navy put you through? Did they put you straight in at the front of a Hornet, or was it another stage before then?
No, not quite. So we went out there, some sort of top-off survival courses and things to make sure that we were doing things in accordance with the US Navy regulations. And then we went to fly the T-45 Goshawk, which is a navalized version of the old BAE Systems Hawk. So we did a sort of bespoke course on that to get us enough experience to go and carrier qualify daytime only on that aircraft. Which is a requirement prior to going to the F-18 conversion unit. So we did about 6 to 12 months on the Goshawk, and then moved over to the F-18.
And then starting the F-18 training, did you go straight to the Super Hornet, or did you start on the Legacy Hornet?
So for the Royal Navy pilots at the time that went out, it just depended on what unit you went to, what station, and what was sort of available and what the US Navy required. I myself was straight onto Super Hornets and did all my training on the Super Hornet from the get-go.
It is an incredible aeroplane. Obviously, having seen it display many times over the years, the performance is mind-blowing. I'd love to have a go, that's for sure. And when you are stationed with the US Navy, do you get sent on board regularly? Is it a monthly occurrence, or do you tend to be at the air station and then every now and then go on board a carrier?
So for a frontline pilot, which all of the Royal Navy pilots, or certainly the majority of them, went frontline out there. We had a few instructors, but once you are frontline, it just depends on the workup cycle. You will certainly be on board the ship at least once or twice in a year period, doing some form of exercise, usually between 4 and 6 weeks at a time. But then that intensifies prior to deployment. And the year prior to deploying, you'll spend quite a lot of time on the ship. And I think in the last part of my frontline tour, out of 2 years, I think I did the best part of 14 months on the ship in 2 years.
That's incredible. These aircraft carriers aren't really ships, are they? They are buildings in their own right. They have thousands of people on board.
It's absolutely a floating city. With the carrier air wing on board, it's about 5,500 people on board to make that deliver the effect that it's designed to do. So,
and how many aircraft would you be talking about with the carrier air wing?
So the carrier wing, somewhere, I would say somewhere around 70 aircraft. It's usually somewhere in the region of 7 or 8 squadrons, and that comprises of a couple of helicopter squadrons, usually 4 to 5 fast jet squadrons, and then a E2 Hawkeye to give you surveillance capability. And then there's usually a detachment of C2 Greyhound to do carrier on board delivery, bringing the mail and other good news.
It's just mind-blowing, just the sheer scale of it. Now, we're not in the position where we don't have carrier capability anymore, that the Royal Navy now has the new aircraft carrier, the Queen Elizabeth. Have you been on board? Have you seen it?
I have, yes. I was on board last year for a little bit with work. Jets had just disembarked, so I was on for an exercise on the backside, but it's phenomenal. It's designed from the ground up for F-35. Which makes it, if there is such thing as a 5th generation carrier, it really is. It's leagues of improvement above the US Navy ships. It's a phenomenal ship.
So I do look forward to seeing it in action. I know 617 Squadron are currently deployed on it for some sea trials and sea work, getting the pilots up to speed. So it's a very interesting time. Now, Nick, you've got some footage of some launches and recoveries to these aircraft carriers in Super Hornets. Now, this is something I find incredible. Of course, most people have seen Top Gun. They've seen how the F-14 did it back in the day. Now, if you could just talk us through some of the footage we're seeing on the screen now, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it starts off with doing some launches by the look of it. So on the flight deck, it is such a busy place to work, and everybody really has to have their heads on a swivel. The things I would use to describe it, it's noisy. It is so noisy. You've got jets running, props turning, helicopter rotors spinning. It's always windy. The ship is always trying to sail into wind, even when it's just manoeuvring. So you're always sort of 20, 30 knots at least over the deck. So an awful lot going on. And actually, even though it's a huge space, we seem to manage to take up most of it when we're doing flying operations. So the video here, an F-18 Super Hornet lining up on one of the waste catapults. The ship has 4. And this looks like one of the wastes. And as you can see, it's just incredibly impressive place to work. The shuttle there going between the marshaller's legs to line up, and some excited hand signals there to get us all set up. I think the video now is going to one of the topside petty officers. We're about to launch another F-18 off of one of the waste catapults here. And you can see everybody just staying out the way behind a red and white foul line. The jet there just going through its final checks at full power. Thumbs up from the deck crews that it's ready to launch. And the shooter there taking a knee and ordering the jet to be fired. And off it will go very shortly. At this point for the pilot, it really is just along for the ride. There's very little effect that we have at that point. So now the topside petty officer here, he's going to hook the next Super Hornet on. So he's signalling here to start taxiing the jet forward, which the marshal will do. And what his job is to make sure that the undercarriage is locked into the launch shuttle. So he's just watching that white launch bar click into place right there, and he's checking that red holdback fitting to make sure that that is secured as well. And that allows the pilot to go to full power without obviously moving down the flight deck. At this point, it's just rewinding here to the same shot of it taking up the tension on the catapult run. Once the tension is taken up here, you are pretty much locked onto a loaded gun. So he'll run and get out the way, and then the signal will be to the pilot to go to full power. So the pilot now selecting full power, checking some systems, which we'll talk about in a minute. And here you can see the catapult firing, enlisted sailor here working through that. So the catapult's now armed, the steam is in the chamber, and as I said, this is a loaded gun. Checking forward, checking aft, and then shoot the aircraft off. Duck so that you don't get your head taken off, and the jet's airborne. Obviously different to the new systems on the US ships. These older ships are all steam powered, and now we're onto sort of electromagnetic launches. So from the cockpit view here, just wiping out the controls, making sure that flight control system's good, the hydraulics are good. A quick check that there's no codes popped, and then a salute to the shooter to tell him that I'm all good to go. Jets at full power, and then, as I said, just along for the ride. We're about 0 to 150 miles an hour in about 2.5 seconds is what it is. So very, very impressive. Once airborne, a quick clearing turn, because we will launch jets simultaneously off the bow and off the waist. So climbing out to 500 feet, accelerating to about 300 knots, and then heading out away from the ship. Should be another video, I think, coming on. From the HUD perspective, you can see the speed in the left there, stuck at 48 knots, very quickly 100 knots, and then there's 165 knots or so, which is fairly common within about 2 seconds or so of getting launched. And as I said, a quick clearing turn to the left, climbing up to 500 feet, get the gear up, get the flaps up, and we're away.
Well, that is just, I could watch that all day. It's so fantastic. Now, I don't know the answer to this. I've seen it all the time. The different colours that everybody on the flight deck wears. What do those colours mean? Obviously, it's a system to enable people to move around and do their jobs. What do they mean?
It is. So as I sort of alluded to earlier, there is so much going on the flight deck, and the colour system is to denote people's responsibilities on the flight deck, and it allows the officers that are controlling those events, and the chief petty officers who are looking down from the islands to understand who is doing what, and the same thing for the air crew and everyone else. So usually for the yellow shirts that you see out there, they're involved with moving aircraft, so either taxiing them or launching them. We have brown shirts out there, which are usually squadron maintenance crews or deck maintenance crews. So they'll either be maintaining the serviceability of aircraft or potentially the ship systems like the catapults or the arresting gear. Purple shirts, known as the grapes, they do all our fuel. So they'll be putting fuel into the aircraft. Green, again, tend to be engineering personnel, looking after systems on the aircraft. And there's probably other colours that I can't remember. Whites tend to be safety crews. Landing signals officers wear white as well. And everyone has a sort of a key role that they work on. And I think that is the most impressive thing, actually, about the carrier environment is the teamwork. It really is. If you walk around, you'd be stunned at the ages on the flight deck. The average age out there is probably low 20s, an awful lot of teenagers with an awful lot of responsibility. It really is very, very impressive.
You could say it quite literally runs on rails, couldn't you?
Yeah, on a good day.
And how does that read across into carrier ops for the F-35 on Queen Elizabeth? Is it the same principle?
It is. It's a different system without catapult launching and arrested landings. Dare I say it's a little bit simpler. So there's still a lot going on the flight deck, but we can do it with less people. So it's not as busy as the US carrier. We won't have 70 aircraft on Queen Elizabeth. We'll build up the numbers into double digits, but nothing near the same volume. But what we've taken is an awful lot of experience and knowledge from the US Navy. We've had, as well as people like myself who were getting experience flying, we sent other sailors out to work on the flight deck, to work in the control rooms, to get that experience. And that has all now been fed into Queen Elizabeth to write our sort of standard operating procedures there.
It's amazing. I'd love to see it in operation. So perhaps one day I'll try and get an invite on board. But I think now...
Jimmy, tomorrow.
I think now we're going to look at the other end. So you finish your mission, and now is the time, all the pressure's on you. You're in the middle of the ocean, and you've got to get this Super Hornet back on the deck. So what we'll do, we'll play some footage of the recovery phase, the landings, and if you can talk us through that, please, Nick.
Absolutely. So this is looking back at myself, finals term. Day, nice weather like this, what we call case one. We'll fly a visual pattern here. So rolling out on finals, and I'm actually targeting only about 15 to 18 seconds on finals. And that is just to keep our recoveries expeditious and get as many jets on board as quickly and safely as possible. Here, just making small corrections. You'll see the flight deck come under me, and then it's sort of surprise is what we're looking for. I'm busy flying accurately, and I'll be surprised by the jet hitting the deck if I'm doing it properly. Rolling backwards slightly, releasing the cable, hook goes up, and a thumbs up to the ground crew sounds serviceable. From the HUD view here, you can see rolling out on finals, about 250 feet above the ocean. I'm a little bit high now, which I can see from both the meatball, which you can see on the deck to the left. You'll see it starting to go above the references, so a little bit high here, not my best efforts. And then working the line up to make sure I try and touch down on centerline. And that's the thing that catches a lot of people out, is that deck, because it's angled, it's always moving to the right. So you're constantly having to adjust line up the entire time. Looking down from the cockpit, you can see it's constant throttle adjustments with the left hand here. And you're constantly adding power the whole time, because your runway, not only is it moving from right to left on you, but it's also moving away from you the whole time. So you're constantly adding power to maintain glide slope, a little bit of stick to maintain centerline, and then a very aggressive deceleration as you come into the wires here. If you don't have your straps up tight, you will headbutt the instruments at the front, and your knee boards and other bits of paperwork do tend to go flying in the process. So.
What footage that is. I mean, that just shows just how hard you're working to get it as accurate as possible. Now, call the ball. In Top Gun, call the ball. What is that?
So we have what's called the meatball. It's part of a mirror lens system, or lighted lens system that is it's like Pappy's at an airfield, but a lot more accurate, and it gives us a glide slope reference to fly the approach with. So at about 3/4 of a mile, we'll be, if we're using comms, so on a nice day like you can see here with the LSOs getting out of the way, we'd actually will go comm out. We won't make any comm calls. But at night or in poor weather, we will make comm calls. And at about 3/4 of a mile, or as we roll on to finals, if it's during the daytime, we'll be asked to call the ball. So here's a picture of it at night. You can just make the ball out with the to the left side of the runway there. And what I'm saying is that I can see the where I am on glide slope. That's what I'm telling them. And then by them rogering that up, saying Roger ball, that is effectively a clearance to land. Is a simple way of thinking about it.
Absolutely amazing. I have to say, you come off a busy mission, maybe with some refueling, you've been airborne for hours. You've then got to recover to a floating airfield in the middle of the ocean, which is going up and down and left and right, and it could be poor weather, it's pitch black, you have no diversion options. Yeah, I take my hat off to you for putting a jet on that tiny little runway in the middle of an ocean.
When we went through, both of us went through flying training, we were always taught to compartmentalize and to break up the missions. But for this sort of naval aviation, whether it's this or whether it's now with the F-35, it's so important that when the mission's finished and you've got that transit back to the ship, you sort of take that mission cassette tape out, you put in your administrative or domestic flying hat back on, and get ready to do the best landing. And you have to make the margins are pretty tight. It's a fairly unforgiving environment, so you really have to get your head back in the game and make every pass, as we call it, every landing, the best that you can possibly do.
It's absolutely amazing. Well, Nick, thank you. That is, I've learned a lot today, and I just love watching footage of that sort of operation, because it is always incredible to watch. And thank you for your time.
No, thanks for having me.
Aerobility exists to help disabled people change their lives through the magic of flight. Whatever the disability, whether it's a young person with autism or a wounded soldier, perhaps somebody with Alzheimer's even, or an acquired disability or medical condition, we give everybody the chance to participate and to fly with our specially adapted aircraft and equipment such as the hoist, which can safely lift somebody into the pilot seat to take the controls for the first time.
The one thing that's fantastic about Aerobility is the way that there is no difference between people who are disabled and those that are non-disabled.
When I'm up there, just another voice on the radio, and that's all I want to be, just another voice. And Aerobility has enabled that completely.
They gave me that purpose back, they gave me that sense of worth again, and for that I'm forever thankful.
time is tough for everybody right now, but if you can help, please do. Through your support, we can continue to change lives and support disabled people through the magic of flight. Thank you.
I am happier.
I am more confident.
I am feeling positive about my life.
Thanks to Aerobility.
And thank you to you. We're delighted that the Armchair Airshow is supported by such great companies from the world of aviation. We're particularly grateful to our lead sponsor, Aerobites. Aerobites provides flight safety systems for over 250 airlines worldwide. So it's highly likely that you personally have flown on an aircraft supported by Aerobites. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Eddie and Emma from Aerobites and our two hosts, George and John.
Hey, good afternoon, Eddie. Hi, Emma. Hi, John.
Eddie, can you tell us a bit about the company Aerobites?
Absolutely. We started trading early 2000s. Flight safety software is what we mainly do. Everyone's heard of a black box. That's used to record flight data for investigating accidents, mainly after the event. Flight data monitoring is where you take the data daily, weekly from the aircraft, analyse it with software like ours, and look for problems before they actually make accidents. So it's a proactive accident prevention tool.
Emma, tell us, how did you get involved with Aerobility?
We were introduced to Aerobility through the Blades as a charity that they support also. And we formed a relationship, and we've been supporting Aerobility for a few years now. It's an amazing charity. They fly over 1,000 passengers every year. They support disabled pilots through their private pilot's licenses. And of course, when we heard about the Armchair Airshow, we were delighted to be able to help make sure that this charity gets through the other side of these difficult times, and that they can continue doing the amazing stuff that they do for people.
Absolutely.
Yes, well said. And thank you to Aerobites for their support of Aerobility and the Armchair Airshow. I hope you're all enjoying the show. My name's Ian. We've had Mike Ling this morning talking us through some Reds material and that fantastic sequence with Nick Smith and the F-18. I hope you were as engrossed as I was during that. We've got more to come. George and John are going to join me this afternoon, one at a time. They keep making it a little bit easier for me this week. So we'll have George up at probably in about half an hour, and we'll be talking to the Great War Display team. And John will follow on a little while later. We've got one more interview with him and lots more action as well. Speaking of action, where are we looking? Probably about 10 minutes time, we've got Jetman Dubai with their first autonomous flight. This is incredible stuff. This is launching from the ground up to altitude to then go into normal flight. A remarkable achievement which they achieved earlier this year. Right now though, we've got two aircraft that are very used to a bit of vertical takeoff and landing. We'll start with the Chinook, and then we'll have the British helicopter team. This Chinook video, it's part 1 of 3. We'll have part 2 later, and part 3 will be out on the Chinook display team's YouTube and social media channels. Let's get stuck in with part 1.
I am the Chinook Force Commander, and I have the pleasure of introducing the Chinook display team's virtual show for 2020. The team at RF Odeum has been busy reviewing footage from previous display seasons. They've put together 3 videos that offer a unique insight into the Chinook's impressive display maneuvers. The crew will be talking through their roles using never-seen-before footage. Sit back and enjoy the ride.
You join us running in for one of the overland displays from last year. This was one of my favourite bits of the display as we arrive on what we call the B-axis, 90 degrees perpendicular from the crowd and pull up to about 50 degrees up. Gently nose the aircraft over, and now we get to see the crowd for the first time. It was one of the most exciting bits for me, and one of the bits of the display I always used to really love.
At this point, the co-pilot has now briefed the next few maneuvers and instructed the pilot to brake right at crowd centre. You can now see the aircraft running out crowd left and being constantly corrected for wind by the pilot. The co-pilot is patterning the next manoeuvre, which will be the pedal turn, the entry parameters of which are 120 knots and 100 feet, where the pilot will then pull up to 45 degrees nose up, where at given time he will apply pedal to complete the manoeuvre.
Coming off the pedal turn, I'm now 45 degrees nose down. My eyes go back up to the horizon, positioning the aircraft for the next manoeuvre, the roller coaster. The roller coaster is a series of 2 noseovers down the A-axis. About 120 knots, 100 feet, pull the aircraft up to 50 degrees nose up. Face full of sky, gently nose the aircraft over. 50 degrees nose down, and I'm aiming to bottom the aircraft out at crowd centre at about 100 feet above the ground before repeating the manoeuvre. All the time I'm having to fight the aircraft because the slab side of the aircraft is affected hugely by the wind. The aircraft's now building up energy for the next manoeuvre in the display, which is the wing over. So it consists of a 45-degree left bank turn, pitching the aircraft nose up and simultaneously rolling right. And this manoeuvre is used when we have a late spot on a landing site and we need to get back in quickly. The airspeed decays around the turn and it reduces the radius of turn and we can get back much quicker.
Thanks for watching part 1 of Virtual Display. Tune back in to see part 2 and please carry on following us on social media.
So we'll have part 2 in about an hour's time. Yeah, more helicopter action to come up straight away with the British helicopter team. Makes me wonder what the Chinook would make of this. This is a helicopter sort of school sports day, I would say. It's a bit more dramatic than that, no doubt a bit more challenging. But we've got a good few minutes here of what it's like to put a helicopter through these kind of obstacle course, no doubt time trials. Yeah, seeing a Chinook taking this on would be interesting.
Thank you, and a very warm welcome from the British helicopter team. We're delighted to be taking part in today's Armchair Airshow. And we hope you'll find our presentation both enjoyable and informative. So, to kick things off, a simple question. Who fancies a go at helicopter racing? Today we're going to give you a brief introduction into just one of the events that we compete at and flies onto Container B. Once the fender is in Container B, the helicopter climbs another 2 metres as the crewman pays out more rope until the third and final red handling aid is visible at 8 metres. With the fender in the last container, the crewman can discard the rope, at which point the clock stops and the helicopter is free to leave the competition area via the exit gate. The fastest to complete the course with the fewest penalty points wins. So for today's demonstration we have some French colleagues from the European Championships at Le Touquet. Pilot Emmanuel Delorme is on the left of your picture and his crewman is Philippe Delatte. Gold medal winners at this event would normally complete the course in around a minute, but we'd like to show you a slower time as we want you to be able to follow what's going on. So we're not showing you any record breakers. And away they go. So the first obstacle is the entry gate with the rope at 4 metres, and the fender has to pass directly between the uprights. An early oscillation seems to have developed. Coming up to the entry gate, and they've missed it. Into penalty points straight away. Going back for another attempt. Emmanuel just lining up the aircraft. That oscillation still isn't under control. And with a nudge they're through, resetting the penalty points. Now to Container A. They're flying the Robinson R-22 helicopter, which is generally regarded as the world's most popular trainer. And as they approach the first container, they're close to the 50-second time limit. Now they're into penalty point territory and all will be added at the end. Don't forget, bumps or scrapes on the outside of the container will result in 5 penalty points. And the fender is in. Now the helicopter ascends 2 metres as Philippe pays out more rope. The pilot Emmanuel listening to his crewman and making slight adjustments as they go. A textbook entry into the second container. Philippe now pays out more rope and up goes the helicopter. A fender weighing in at 8 kilograms, hanging at the end of a long rope combined with downwash is not easy to control. 5 penalty points there. Gradually getting control of that swing with applied concentration and muscle power. And there's another 5 penalties. Well over 2 minutes now and 2 more touches. He's grazed the outside of the rim, the fender's in and the rope's gone. 5 more penalty points. So with the clock stopped at 2 minutes 14.86 and with the extra time penalty points, that gives them a total of 99.9 out of 300. You might like to know that this pair went on to finish overall 9th in the European Championships. And that brings our presentation to a close for today. We hope we've whetted your appetite for helicopter racing, which is a fabulous spectator event, so keep your eyes open for it.
Superb flying there, just incredible stuff. Yeah, just, the skill and expertise on show there is superb. And a big thank you to Hayward Aviation, a wonderful supporter of Aerobility, this event and that flying that you've just been witnessing. So from some vertical flying of one sort to vertical flying of a very, very different sort, and very unique stuff indeed from Jetman Dubai. This is a video showing their achievement earlier this year of their first autonomous flying. This is taking off from the ground up to altitude and flying around as they've been able to, having launched from helicopters in the past. This is their process that they've had to go through, which has been a long time coming to this achievement where they can now take off from the ground. Let's take a look.
tomorrow, call on a meeting and tell them that they are
Today has been a fantastic day because we already have a unit that looks considerably stronger and it definitely looks like it's manned for the job. It's not a new engine, it's the thrust vector system, which is obviously to give us more stability whilst vertical. At present, the boys use their feet and their body position whilst flying vertically in a hover position. Now we can automate that system, which will give them much more control stability and also help us to bring landings and takeoffs into the equation.
Ah, come on, he didn't even try. Something's wrong.
This is what R&D is. It's all about testing and developing and seeing what works, what doesn't work.
Actually, the pilot has a joystick in his hand and is able to move like a game. These two servos, which will act like, you can see the thing is moving. We are testing the thrust vector, which is the equipment that the pilot uses for now to move left and right. And we are not happy about the final results, so we are refining it.
Our next step is more ground testing, more data analysis. We have to, as always with R&D, test to failure and see what parts work and what don't. This was a 5 or 6 phase plan anyway, and all components need to be tested to their limits.
We keep the communication between us. If there is an engine that shuts down, because that's the most tricky, is that if I'm flying and then suddenly I have an engine shut down, if I'm in the middle it's fine, but if I'm close to the ramp, then it's not the best.
You begin with 2 wheels, and then once you've got the balance, you remove the 2 wheels and you go. And that's the way we want to go. Like that's what I was saying by keep it simple.
Like if I was removing my left foot from the exhaust, it started to turn right away, even on the platform. So it's no point that we do it again until we have the thrust vector. It's a waste of time right now.
We always train the safest way possible, so having Vince on a tether gives us full control should he get unstable. And the platforms are to control the thrust variation from the height of the runway at Skydive Dubai.
We are testing the new system, which is the TV, the thrust vectoring nozzle, which will help the pilots to move the wing during the vertical flight, during the takeoff. And for the future takeoff and landing system. We are closer every day.
That's enough. Ah man, it feels good. Big teamwork. You know, we started the test not even a week ago. You know, Thursday last week we did the first test without stabilization. I burned my foot like crazy. And the boys, you know, they mounted a thrust vector that is literally like 2 pieces that it's welded together. It's massive. No, it's big, man. I don't know what to say more.
There's been a lot of work on the engine, on the thrust vector, on the remote as well to control the engines.
We want to have a manual control of the thrust vector. He can't put his hands in the engine exhaust, so he moves a little piece of metal that does it.
This is just some work that's been done. Basically, after every flight, we get some feedback, and then we can know any modification to do and what to go further.
Unfortunately, accidents do occasionally happen, but we have always the emergency action plan in place. At this point, it was due to a shoe failure, which made Vince slip and fall. We went straight into action and recovered him safely with no injuries.
So let's, okay, please everyone, like it's very important that now we all focus good on this, because my safety is depending on this. We forgot to plug my throttle cable when we were up there. I'm pretty good with concentration, but when I put myself, into this, it's like every little thing, are counting. In the air, it was problem yesterday. It's problem on the ground. We're gonna have the same problem then the next day.
So number 2 is having an issue during the startup. It's slow to accelerate, so it's not reaching the stabilized RPM. So there is a timeout for the starting stage. So if the turbine doesn't reach the certain RPM, it shuts down again. So we're gonna have to replace the engine.
We find the solution, so we are happy. Today is great because we are moving from the rope and pulley system to the fall arrestor, which is basically an automatic winch, which will be closer to reality for the pilot.
Right now we feel confident, we've done like a lot of tests on the ground, for the past 2.5 weeks, a lot of tests. And the only problem that we had, they were caused by the cable, like the rope that we had that creates some movement. So as I'm moving, it's like the cable pulls you, so it creates like an effect on the body.
So we've done over 100 ground tests on the cable system for hovering and movement. Now we need to move to the helicopter where we will work out the hover to transition into flight, making sure that we do not lose any altitude with a combination of thrust to lift of the wing in the climb out to safe altitude.
I'm ready, bro. Let's do it Sunday. I feel good, man.
So now the last thing we need is just to know if we will not have any trouble with the water and backwashing that can lead to an engine shutdown.
We are practicing to take off from the ground above the water. So then if there is a problem more on the control, then I finish in the water and not on the ground. It felt good, man. Now let's hope tomorrow there is no wind,
So we're here in the marina at Skydive Dubai, hopefully going to put something into the history books today. Everybody's excited. The guys have been working really hard on the thrust vectors and creating that technology, and hopefully today we will transition from takeoff into vertical flight and make history. So it's going to be a great day.
We have almost 100 test flights at the moment with the system, everything working flawless. Vince and Fred are super on track. And yeah, the team has just been working night and day for the last 2 months almost for this.
We took off from the ground with the jet wing, and basically we were controlling just the yaw movement, which is the turn with a joystick. And then after that, we just played a bit above the water, and then when everything was good, then I went into flight and climb into altitude, and it's a big step for us because it's the first time that we are completely autonomous, where we take off from the ground and then we went to altitude, to more than 1,000 meters. I pull a looping and then I open my parachute. So it's big. We are all proud of each other, of the work that we did, of this first dream, this first step of our dream, to take off from the ground, to be completely autonomous. But this is just the beginning, there is much more coming, and we are training on different stuff, projects that you guys will see in the future, and it's gonna be great, no?
Yeah. We're just getting started.
We're just getting started.
Well, for a group of guys who are just getting started, that's quite some achievements. Huge thanks to the Jetman Dubai team for letting us share that video with you. I don't think it's been shared elsewhere, and many congratulations on what is an incredible achievement. You don't have to be too much of an av geek to watch the pilot there soaring into the sky above Dubai, having taken off from the ground. The ultimate freedom. And very many congratulations to the guy, and thanks again for letting us share that video with everyone watching the Armchair Airshow this afternoon. Now, speaking of which, we've got another guest joining us, or another host, I should say. There's George. Let's make sure I've got the right one. George! Oh, do you know what? George, I've said welcome, so welcome, but I've got all these people in the chat who want to say hello as well. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to say hello, and maybe we both can say a quick hello.
Let's have a group hug.
Let's have a group hug. Why not? Together. There's Nikki Kerner in the chat celebrating her 18th birthday week, kicking it off with a bit of aviation action on the Armchair Airshow. I think what better way to start a birthday week than that? And I wanted to say a welcome to Michael over on YouTube. Good to see you again. And we've got guests there, viewers there from as far afield airfield as Jamaica and Cape Town as well. So Chad, if you're watching as well, monitoring the chat on the Aerobility social media channels, it'd be interesting to see just how far flung our audience is today, George. But you're joining me from home today. How are you, George?
Yes, just in delightful little Hampshire, where it's just down the road from headquarters Aerobility, of course, in Blackbush. Having a wonderful afternoon. It's been a real pleasure, actually, to sit back and see some of this uncut, unseen footage, because even ourselves, we haven't had the chance to go through so much of it, and it's just wonderful stuff. But really a special thank you to all of you, wherever you are in the world, enjoying this show, helping us to support this wonderful charity, Aerobility. And I just want to say, well, how proud I am to have been part of that team for so many, many years. Now, we're going to dip back into the heritage world, which is where I think I left off 2 weeks ago on Saturday, the 20th. And whilst many of you I know would have been absolutely gripped by that F-18 footage, it was, of course, equally gripping 100 years ago. Well, over that now, of course, for those guys, the pioneers of aviation, who, having only been qualified just literally a few years, then had to go to war. And around the UK air display circuit, one of the most popular teams these days who've made a really, really massive impact is the Great War Display Team. And they really are the magnificent men in their flying machines. And I'm delighted this afternoon to welcome one of the team members, Trevor Bailey. Trevor, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, George. Thanks for having us.
Well, no, real pleasure to have you join us, Trevor, because this piece I was just absolutely gripped by. It was terrific. It's outstanding footage, but there is quite a story behind it, isn't there? And of course, a pretty famous musician as well. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, it is. A number of our fans will know that Bruce Dickinson, the lead singer of Iron Maiden, owns one of our aircraft to fly, and indeed has flown with us many times in the past. Not so much recently. And this came about in, I think it was 2014. It was the anniversary of the start of the Great War. And Bruce and the band were at Nebworth for a huge concert, about 100,000 people. And his aircraft was featuring that, and he had a focus on the start of the Great War and wanted to do something and said, come on, guys, why don't we do a display? Well, you don't have to ask a bunch of pilots, especially display pilots, very many times to come up with a display. So yes, it was, and we practiced, rocked off to Henlow, big grass strip, XRAF, or currently an RAF airfield, not too far from Nebworth, where we took off and flew north of the Luton zone into the display line, coming in on the B-axis to a magnificent park full of 100,000 people, not there to watch a flying display of vintage World War I aircraft, but to see Bruce. And here he was in his aircraft flying with us. And the footage has some cockpit video of him as well doing that.
Right. Now, if Ian will let us just have a little listen to some of the background, we've got a little bit of music, but also there's gunfire on there as well. Let's just get a feel of what it's like to be in those cockpits. Amazing, absolutely dramatic, historical gunfire as well.
Well, that's part of the show routine. Typically, when we do it, we now have pyrotechnics as well out in the field. When we arrive, you've got the equivalent of ACAP going up, which always gets the crowd's attention, particularly at airfields like Duxford, where we come in on the B-axis, and you get a bunch of up to 9 or 10 of us if we have the full team flying, like a little bunch of hornets, which kind of changes the pace of it from the Spitfires and jets and things whizzing around, because we're flying probably the lowest powered, slowest aircraft on the circuit with maximum speeds of about 100 knots, 90 horsepower engines in some instances, particularly mine, probably the slowest of the lot. And then we come in and we can keep the display right in front of the crowd line. So they're very maneuverable, albeit slow. And we aim to depict what would have been a dogfight, which would have taken place probably at 10 or 15,000 feet above the German lines in World War I, but at 100 feet and above. And then we have a routine which is choreographed. It looks like kind of unorganized madness, but in fact, if everybody's doing their bit, we know where everybody is, and we make it into a mock dogfight. And some of the aircraft have smoke. And then we have sound system with the gunfire, the ACAC, and the bombs going off in the distance. So to really recreate the atmosphere for the crowds of what these guys, who were probably just late teenagers at the time, with very few hours, suddenly having to face their enemy in the skies above the trenches of World War One.
Well, you do such a fantastic job bringing that all to us and to so many people around the country. And even my own guys down at Middle Wallop saw you very much as the aiming mark for putting together a disparate bunch of aircraft and keeping them all in front of the crowd at the same time. And you do that magnificently well. Getting from A to B, though, around the country in a typical British summer, though, can surely be tricky with open cockpits, the cold, the wind, the rain, etc. I'm assuming you've got, obviously, the GPS to help you, though.
Well, we certainly have our GPSs, and Sky Demon, of course, is a great wonder these days. But opening maps in open cockpits, as you well know, George, is pretty much a no-no. It's ripped straight out behind you. So we're very much flying low. We get nosebleeds much above 1,000 feet, most of us. Probably the worst thing is that being a bunch of old blokes, it's probably not the aircraft, the fuel duration that limits us. It's our bladders as much as anything else in terms of where we can get to. But we did, I think it was in 2018, my very best memory, it was just fantastic at the time. I thought, why on earth are we doing this? And we flew, I think, 6 or 7 of the aircraft down to Le Fertelet in central France for the celebrations of the end of the 2014-2018 war, to a big air show that occurs there every year. And it was really quite humbling going out across the cliffs of Dover in these little aircraft, across the sea, into northern France and flying where once there would actually have been trenches. And here we were, a bunch of replica aircraft, but nevertheless, they fly pretty much the same speeds, perhaps slightly more reliable engines. And we were flying across this country. Probably one of the most humbling experiences of my aviation life, for sure.
Yes, I can assure, quite an emotional experience. Well, we're going to actually visit Le Fertelet in about 10 minutes' time in a completely different aircraft. So stay tuned. If you, yes, oh yes. Well, you stay with us, Travis. But actually, before you go, you very kindly made a very, very generous offer to everybody following and raising money for Aerobility. Tell us about that.
Well, we've done this before, and what we thought in terms of being able to help, particularly Aerobility, it's an aviation charity, and all charities are going through difficult times at the moment. So how could we provide something or do something into the lottery that will help to raise funds? So what we'd like to do is to offer a flight in one of the two-seaters, either the B2C or the Biggles biplane, which brought to fame in W.E. John's books, or the Avro 504, where you can fly front seat. Matt Boddington will be the pilot behind you, and we'd probably do this at Sywell Airdrome, big grass airfield, where we tend to do our practices before going off to air displays. We'd like to have done it at an air show, but air shows these days are so restricted in time, everything else, that it's impossible. So it's better actually to come and meet the team, get involved with us during a practice, and then take a flight in one of the aircraft. We've done it once or twice before, and it works extremely well. In fact, the last time, I think it might have been another Aerobility one, and we departed, I think, in the Avro 504 with the lottery winner in the front seat, with myself and Pete Bond in the DR1 on the other side, in formation, before we departed home from that, and a quick roll off the top as we went our separate ways. So it is quite an experience and pretty unique.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and that indeed very, very generous yet again. We're going to put that, Trevor, into the end of season, what would normally be the Aviators Ball. We're not sure what shape that will take, of course, this year with the current restrictions placed upon us, but we will be having an event of some sort where you can bid for that flight. And I noticed after the last auction that I've got to entertain Jeff Cleary again down at Middle Wallop. So I might just bid to come and have a flight in that BE2. I would love to do that. So thank you very much indeed, Trevor Bailey, and thank you to the Great War Display team. Of course, we are supported by so many people and their generosity. Mike Miller-Smith at the headline start of this outlined many of the sponsors. Let's take another look now at one of our key sponsors from Biggin Hill.
Hello, everybody. My name is David Winstanley. I'm the CEO of London Biggin Hill Airport. As you would have probably know, we would have been celebrating the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Britain with our own air show. And therefore, we're absolutely delighted to support the Armchair Airshow, a fantastic initiative by a fantastic charity. So everybody here at Biggin Hill is delighted to support Aerobility. So sit back, chill out, and enjoy what will be a fantastic show.
Aerobility exists to help disabled people change their lives through the magic of flight. Whatever the disability, whether it's a young person with autism or a wounded soldier, perhaps somebody with Alzheimer's even, or an acquired disability or medical condition, we give everybody the chance to participate and to fly with our specially adapted aircraft and equipment such as the hoist, which can safely lift somebody into the pilot seat to take the controls for the first time.
You know, the one thing that's fantastic about Aerobility is the way that there is no difference between people who are disabled and those that are non-disabled.
When I'm up there, just another voice on the radio, and that's all I want to be, just another voice. And Aerobility's enabled that completely.
They gave me that purpose back, they gave me that sense of worth again, and for that I'm forever thankful.
Time is tough for everybody right now, but if you can help, please do. Through your support, we can continue to change lives and support disabled people through the magic of flight. Thank you.
I am happier.
I am more confident.
I am feeling positive about my life.
Thanks to Aerobility.
And thank you to you.
Very great to all of you to be here. We're supported by so many generous people, and we'll have a look now at the range of sponsors that are supporting. I feel very much that all my time I'm part of that sponsorship team. I remember getting a tap on my shoulder 15 years ago from John Wendover at the Eastbourne Airshow, almost 15 years ago to the month, actually. The simple question is, how can we get the air display fraternity and community involved in raising money for Aerobility? Well, it really was a no-brainer. It was such an easy decision to make, and so many of my friends have since got involved, and I've seen the whole charity grow exponentially over those years. And I'm very pleased now to continue, obviously, my role as an Aerobility, and now a chance to remind all of you out there, of course, that the simplest way that you can help today is to merely go to your phone and text 70490, just insert fly 5. If you wish to change that donation, you can indeed range from 1 to 20. All the terms and conditions are on the website, but they're also on the screen now as well. You just put in fly, that will donate £10, or fly any number between 1 and 20, and that money will go straight into the charity to help do the wonderful things that you've seen in that appeal video. Well, coming up now in the next few minutes, of course, a reminder at the same time, I hope we've got this ready before we move on, this wonderful lottery that is running alongside the Armchair Airshow and throughout the rest of the year as well, to win the most outstanding motorcycle, complete with Spitfire parts involved, but it is the smell and of course the history of motorcycling in UK. But together with this, let's have a look at this video. You will now see that you'll get a flight in the Spitfire as well. So plenty of options for you to choose from there. It's entirely up to you. Grab your phone, put in a text, or go straight to the button on the website and just punch in a lottery and buy yourself one. Why not buy yourself 5 tickets? Because it's the most fantastic prize, isn't it? Well, we're going to move on with a bit more flying now, of course, because that's what we're promoting, and hopefully you're continuing to enjoy this afternoon. And we're in this heritage piece of unseen and uncut footage that we weren't able to cover. Very sadly, the pilot of this next aircraft wasn't able to join us this afternoon. He's actually a police pilot, support pilot in Norway, Gunnar Arneklev. And interestingly enough, you think that most people, it's a difficulty to get into this sort of warbird environment and historic aircraft, but actually he started life as a policeman. He then trained as a fixed-wing pilot, is now converted to a rotary pilot with Norway, but he flies this wonderful Dakota, and it comes from the Norway Dakota Foundation. Sit back now and enjoy a little break as we take a Sunday afternoon drive over some of the most beautiful terrain that Norway has to offer. If you were fans of films like The Heroes of Telemark, you'll recognize some of the beautiful countryside as we look and take a flight now with Gunnar in this beautiful C-53. We're better known, perhaps, got used to it as the C-47 Skytrain, but of course that was quite a different variant in its own right. The C-47 essentially with a stronger floor and the big cargo door for parachuting, and the 2,000 of these were delivered to the Royal Air Force. But this particular one is a C-53DO, and the DO designation on this one stands primarily for the strength of tailplane and the all-important job that these aircraft did towing gliders. This aircraft was actually delivered to the United States 9th Air Force in England on the 8th of October 1943, and it went on to serve as General Ralph Royce's. Yes, very similar to Rolls-Royce, only it was Royce's. He was the deputy commander of the 9th Air Force, and he flew that from March 1944 onwards. You can see the controls in there. It really has that feel of that wonderfully romantic age. I often hark back to the 30s of such a golden age of the development of aviation, and this very much more so. And here we go now, traveling over some of the most stunning countryside that many of us will know and love. The aircraft, after the war, went on to be stored at Oberpfaffenhofen in Germany and was transferred to the Foreign Liquidation Commission to be sold onwards, of course, as part of the disposal of all the surplus equipment. It actually went on to Finland, and it joined Finnair, where it flew right up until 1969. And it was from there operated by the Finnish Air Force, used partly as a VIP aircraft for its president at the time. The markings it's carrying there, you see, of the first Dakotas that operated in Norway from May 1945 up until February 46. Initially operating with number 20 Transport Squadron, and not connected in any way, of course, with the 20 Royal Air Force Squadron itself. Gunnar thoroughly enjoying this transbuild, as I'm sure all of us would, and I think many of us would love to have a spin in this beautifully restored and preserved aircraft as well. Gunnar's now actually the chief pilot with the Norwegian Police Air Support Network, and as I say, discovered this very much in his latter years of aviation. Dakota, synonymous with the title of the company, of course. There are many reasons. It's also the name of an Indian girl, name of also a state in Northern America as well. But the aircraft developed by the Dakota Aircraft Company Transport, and in many ways that's where that acronym and the familiar name of DAX really came into play. And there's Gunnar now, I think, setting up, just going over another beauty spot in Norway, but setting up for his return back to base. Tremendous jobs. We know them in so many different ways, very much unsung heroes of the wartime and post-war period, of course, featured heavily in the Berlin airlift, and very famous names such as Laker made an awful lot of money, and of course he went on to develop another form of Skytrain, and that Skytrain, funnily enough, was the one from Gatwick Airport across to Los Angeles and New York in the mid-80s. Let's just now take a little pause and watch as Gunnar brings this DAC safely back into land. Very cool and not at all working hard at the controls. An absolutely wonderful bird, huge utility aircraft, of course, and did tremendous work. And I think we could spend some time giving testimony and to the huge amount of work that all the DACs did throughout the course of the Second World War and beyond. But we're going to move on now. Time, as always, is against us, and that's one of the many difficulties, of course. We're trying to present this in the round. But I mentioned a little early on when I was talking to Trevor that we were going to visit La Ferté-Alais. It's an absolutely outstanding place. If you're ever driving south through France, do try and take a detour to the airfield, even if there's not too much flying going on, just to see the restoration work and also just to walk around the museum itself. And there's a super little cafe. But now, one of the things we lament in UK is also the disappearance of so many key historic aircraft. And we're going back to the jet world now, but to a very historic jet, and one that is very famous in its own right, and many were flown by the Royal Air Force. We were used to seeing the Sabre, the F-86 in UK when operated by Golden Apple Operations, but of course that operation ceased some years ago. But it's a real pleasure now to be joined by Fred Akari, himself something of a legend in the aerobatic world of France. And we join him as we're about to complete his first pass through La Ferté-Alais. Let's join in with Fred now and the F-86 Sabre. Take it away, Fred.
Okay, so this sequence starts at the end of my first pass, which was a pass with gear down, flaps down, speed brakes out. Then I put the power, make 45 degrees, a day return, just had some slight power because this aircraft is very, very powerful. And in terms of energy management, you have to bring back the throttle a lot during the display. So I'm just using maybe 60 or 70% of the power now. It's 60 degrees turn at about 2 Gs. And then I focus on the airspeed because I don't want to have more than 250 knots in order to make a banana pass for all the crowd. So, okay, I've got 100 feet, 250 knots. Then I had the power about 75, 90%. Then a roll and three-quarter roll on the other side in order to go back to the airport. Then I'm reducing the power at about 75 to 80%, still about 2 Gs. And I will try not to fly more than 300 knots now, going back to the center of the box. And then I'm going to make a 45 degrees loop with one roll at the top. So now I'm climbing, and you can see the airport on the back. Then reducing the power, trying to see the horizon, making a roll, an inside roll. And then now I have to manage the power and the Gs in order to complete this figure just in the middle of the runway and not to overload too much the aircraft. So my goal then is to have about 300 knots at the bottom and 3.5 maximum 4 Gs. Okay, now I'm going at 45 degrees angle from the runway, climbing and making roll in order to turn and to go back on the left side of the aircraft to go back to the airport. Okay, so it was 1.5 roll. then reducing the power. Then I've got about 3.5 Gs. And then I will come back on the airport at 330 feet and at about 300 to 320 knots, not more. Then 1.25 roll to go at 45 degrees from the airport. Then still a day return to go back on the right side in order to come back on the axis at about 350 feet and 320 knots, not more, in order to make a roll. So I got about 3.5, 4 Gs. Then alpha roll and alpha roll. Okay, had some slight power. Then 1.25 of roll to come back. The problem with the aircraft is not to put too much power in order to have 300 to 240 knots maximum. Because the aircraft is able to fly at 600 knots, so but it's not a good thing for the crowd. So coming back, then going back 45 degrees, one roll, and then I'm going to make a Cuban 8, half of a Cuban 8. So pulling of the stick, doing the loop. I've got about 4,000 feet. At the top, 150 knots, alpha roll, reduce power, going down, turning on the right side, and then I've got about 4.5 Gs to 5 Gs. Then 45 degrees angle from the axis, one roll, and doing the same, half of a Cuban 8. So I've got 90% of power now, about 4,000 feet, which is the K point at 150 knots. Going back 45 degrees, alpha roll, going down, and then pulling again on a left turn at about 4.5 Gs to 5 Gs and 320 knots.
Okay, should we pause there just for a moment? Because I see your hors d'oeuvres and your gin and tonic has just been delivered, Fred.
Oh, this is my wife.
No, I thought, hello, bonjour. Oh, bonsoir, of course. Yes, very well.
Okay, that's the last pass. And now the maximum continuous power. And I'm flying at about 200 feet and 500 knots, and then saying an au revoir, a goodbye to everybody. And I would like to say that I had a very great time with all of you and with the Armchair Airshow. It was very nice to speak to you, and hello and bye-bye.
Well, the wonderfully charismatic Fred Akari there. I mean, a Frenchman simply cannot get through the afternoon without a glass of wine. And it was wonderful that cameo performance from his wife there. And of course, behind all of us, there is always somebody supporting us. So absolutely fantastic stuff. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it. Sadly, my slot has rapidly come to a close, but I'm going to give you just one more element that we weren't able to cover before. And all air shows, of course, are not complete without some form of parachuting going on. And we've seen very often the Royal Air Force Falcons, the Tiger parachute display team. Occasionally, I certainly have worked with Aerobatics, the team from France with their paramotors, but not many people in UK have had the chance to see the Flying Dragons. It's pretty spectacular stuff. So if you combine a lot of the stuff that we've been doing with Aerobility, with fireworks on aircraft, then now we combined the two elements together. This is me saying goodbye. Stay with us, please, for the rest of the afternoon. Do give generously. Stand by now. Flying Dragons, clear display. Wojciech, it's a real pleasure to have you joining us on the Armchair Airshow this afternoon. You fly some pretty extraordinary stuff in a very, very different genre of aviation to most of us are used to. How did you get involved in this paramotor aviation environment?
It started when I was a kid. I started to build radio-controlled planes. And then I tried to get involved more in aviation. And the paramotor is, I think, the easiest way to fly for me, and maybe for many people, because it's really cheap, I think, and it's really easy to learn to fly, and you are really free because you don't need the airfield, the big plane. You just got everything in your car. Just leave your job, go to the some place where there are no obstacles, where you can take off. If the weather is good, you just go fly and you're free.
Yeah, and I can see that. I can almost feel it in your footage as well, the real freedom of flying.
Yeah.
Now, are these standard motors that you have and standard parachutes, or have you upgraded them, or are you now flying more advanced equipment compared to the stuff that we were looking at, say, 3 or 4 years ago?
It's not really upgraded, mainly because of our lights. We're using LED lights on the night displays. So there's the main upgrade, and the second one, we're using pyro. So there are platforms attached to our paramotor, the cages, and there is not much tuning on our stuff. You can easily buy the same paramotors to the same wing as we use.
So moving your display into nighttime work is a quantum leap, certainly in safety, but also in terms of timing and planning your display as well. So how do you manage to, first of all, fit the pyrotechnics to the equipment you've got? Because there's not a lot of it.
Yeah, we made the platforms for the pyrotechnics, so we can attach all of them. The main thing is that it's really heavy, and you need to carry everything on your back. You got the paramotor on your backs with fuel, with smoke oil. It is something about 40 kilograms, and with pyrotechnics even more. So that's the only limitation. We could probably get more pyrotechnics, but it's really hard to take off when we run with paramotor on our back with such a heavy thing.
Put my microphone back on, that's a bit better. Well, if you haven't got this far into the afternoon and you're not thinking to yourself, do you know what, taking part in air shows looks rather fun, I don't know what's wrong with you, because that particularly looks like a fantastic way to spend an early evening to me. Synced up light show, pyrotechnics, gliding around with your mates, very good stuff. Time now to tune back in with the Chinook part 2, and joining me shortly will be John Windover to take us through the afternoon slot. About an hour left to run during this live broadcast, but let's take a look at part 2 of the Chinook video.
Welcome back to part 2. We just completed 4 further manoeuvres and you rejoin us from our pedal turn at Crowd Right. Once straight and level, the crewman calls moving, which the pilot acknowledges. The crewman's now unclipped his harness and moves from the front to the rear of the aircraft. Before the next manoeuvre starts, the crewman must reattach his harness and call secure before braking right into the low level 360. During the turn, the crewman is clock coding to crowd centre and the co-pilot is talking about the angular bank and height above the ground. As we approach crowd centre, the pilot will now decelerate the aircraft and at 80 knots simultaneously roll the aircraft right and pitch the nose down to stop the aircraft on a sixpence. It's time for the crewman to hold on. I now lower the ramp as the pilots turn away to face the crowd. With the pilots now facing directly away, I get the best view in the house and I see tens of thousands of people waving back at me. This is by far the most enjoyable part of the display for any crewman.
At the end of the sideways trawl, the crewman's got a limited amount of time to raise the ramp, put the hand away, get to the front of the aircraft and reclip for the next manoeuvre, which is the Gorney spiral climb. Here you can see me rotating the aircraft through 540 degrees whilst climbing vertically over the same point of the ground to a height of about 800 feet. With about 45 degrees to go to the end of the turn, the co-pilot calls it, and then I gently nose the aircraft down 30 degrees below the horizon and then start a gentle left-hand turn to reposition for the next manoeuvre.
During the descent, the pilot is unsighted on his roller feature, which is crowd centre. This means the crewman and co-pilot are both having to talk the pilot's eyes onto the crowd during the left-hand turn. At the end of the turn, the aircraft will be positioned 45 degrees onto the A-axis, where we will be running into crowd centre, which will lead in to the 45-degree breakaway. As the aircraft brakes right, this is where you will hear the famous blade sound. Thanks for watching part 2 and tune back in for part 3 coming up soon. We hope you enjoyed it and please carry on following us on social media.
And that, as I say, was part 2 of the Chinook display video, and as commentator there said, you can watch part 3 on the team's social media, so that's YouTube, on Facebook, and I'm guessing part 3 is probably a little bit too long for Twitter, but you can find the guys over on YouTube and Facebook certainly, and I think that's coming out on Wednesday. Now, just chance before John joins us to dip in with one of the other sponsors of the Aerobility Armchair Airshow.
Well, it's a real pleasure to welcome Simon Beach from Naismith to the Armchair Airshow. And we're going to find out now what the connection is between us. So, Simon, what is it that attracted Naismith to this incredible project?
Well, it's a great idea that you've come up with in the current circumstances, and we really thought it was fitting that we would like to try and support it and encourage this sort of activity going forward. We like what you do with disabled people. We think that's really, really good. We support that. And I guess thirdly, that it supports our brand. I mean, we get involved a lot with aircraft, particularly with legacy aircraft from sort of older aircraft. Do a lot of parts for that, a lot of spares for them. So overall, it's a really, really good concept, and we're really excited about it and want to get involved in it.
Fantastic. Now, James Naismith is a really famous name, particularly in Scottish engineering, and he came up with a thing called a steam hammer. Most people, I think, would probably refer to it as a pile driver now, and it was a real game changer, wasn't it? What is it, or perhaps is there something in Naismith, this group of 12, 13 companies, if there was a game changer you could put your finger on, what do you think it would be across your whole range of companies?
Well, obviously, our founder, our chairman, Mr. Peter Smith, came up with the idea of calling the group Naismith, and he was very into understanding what James Naismith had done and researched at length his achievements, because he did a remarkable number of things. And I've seen the steam hammer in the Science Museum currently. But we pride ourselves being on precision engineers and really emphasising the precision. And we also see ourselves as being stronger through being very broad in a number of sectors. So we're involved with defence, we're involved with civil aerospace, we're involved in original equipment and aftermarket. So we really see our strength as being a provider, a solutions provider across the range of this precision engineering sector, and therefore being able to utilise those capabilities to support customers and aircraft operators around the world in that respect.
Aerobility is about making aviation accessible to everybody with a disability, whatever that disability might be. So we can't do that pretty tricky challenge without the help of the aerospace industry. And when we put the call out to get some support for this slightly crazy idea of a virtual air show, the Armchair Airshow, I'm really thrilled that Naismith got back in touch straight away and said, yeah, we would like to be part of your event and to support your mission to support the disabled community. So thank you, Simon, for your help and support. And yeah, we're really pleased to have you as part of the show.
Thank you very much, and best of luck with the show. I shall certainly be watching it.
Superb. And you can see I've been joined by our third and final host of the afternoon. John, welcome.
Hi guys, how you doing, Ian?
I'm all right. So far, so good. We've survived. We're all doing this remotely, and obviously all the VTs as well. It's a little bit of a juggling act, but I think we're surviving, aren't we? Have you been watching?
You are the consummate plate spinner, Ian. So you've done an awesome job today. So thank you for that. And because you are one of our sponsors, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I don't think anyone's paying me to be here. Anyway, let's quickly move on. John, what have we got to look forward to this afternoon?
So, well, you know, as Lingy and George have said, you know, we've just been overwhelmed with support and interest from the air display community, and also, frankly, the aviation community at large. So yes, I'm joining you from Kent. So we've whizzed our way over from Hampshire, and you've got some interesting stuff coming up actually. But you know what struck me as being absolutely hilarious is this has got to be the first air show where the pilots have been working from home. The crosswinds have meant that people who maybe have been flying today have probably tuned in to watch us. So you know, it's a real ironic situation, but we are looking really good on the numbers who are supporting us. So thank you everybody for that. And I'm going to go straight into a really important bit of information about our charity. I've been with the charity for 15 years. This charity wouldn't be where it is today without the leadership and the vision of Mike Miller-Smith, our chief executive. And this was his idea. We put the first Armchair Air Show together in a matter of 4 weeks with a wonderful team. And that's because we want to underwrite the survival of Aerobility. We want to make sure that the funds coming into this charity allow us to maintain the life-changing work that we do for the disabled community. There's 1 in 10 people in this country who has a disability, and Aerobility is offering that chance to overcome those financial barriers, overcome those issues that the disabled community are facing to be able to change their lives. So I really appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. And I know that everybody in the charity also is hugely thankful. So you can do your piece today by texting. Now, we've already discussed this earlier on. You can text FLY5 to 70490. That will donate £5 to Aerobility. You can donate £1 to £20 by texting FLY or the number 1 to 20 to donate that amount. That'll include a standard rate message. If you don't want to receive any of the information marketing-wise from Aerobility, you can text FLY no info and then that amount. So once again, thank you very much, everybody, for your support, and we'll obviously let everybody know how much we've raised and what that means to Aerobility. Right, it's now my huge pleasure to introduce a good friend of mine, but also someone I think that personifies Aerobility, the charity, and that's Harvey Mathewson. Harvey, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you, John?
Doing very good today, thanks, Harvey. Now, I'm going to embarrass you. Harvey is a one-off. He's a living, breathing dynamo. He is the poster boy of Aerobility. We actually spoke to Arthur Williams a couple of weeks ago at the Armchair Air Show on the 20th of June. Arthur was our first PPL from zero to pilot's license. And I'm very proud to say, and Harvey, of course, is even prouder, to let you all know that he is the latest person to have become the wonderful owner of a pilot's license from the Civil Aviation Authority. So I want to be the first one to say congratulations, Harvey. That's a brilliant achievement. So what we're going to do, we're going to talk a bit about your disability, Harvey. We're going to talk about what you do at Aerobility and also about your journey with flying. So first of all, tell us about your disability.
So I have a quadriplegic cerebral palsy after an incident I had at birth. I always like to joke that I tried holding my breath before I was born and it didn't go so well. But it wasn't until the age of 2 that we discovered that I did have cerebral palsy. I wasn't developing as normal. And I think that was quite a shocking development at the time. I mean, the firstborn child, you want everything to go smoothly, but with me, that wasn't the case.
Now, Harvey, obviously, you know, as you grew older, you became self-aware of your condition. And tell us about your early years and your teenage years and how you coped with that.
It was really difficult. So yesterday I was talking about this and I didn't actually speak to another disabled person my own age until I was about 11, 12 years old when I went to a school with a specialist unit. So, of course, primary school being their first ever disabled student, it was very tough and there was lots of opposition there. I think my first teacher almost refused to educate me, saying I would be lucky to ever read or write. But secondary school, being with like-minded people and sort of accepting that difference, helped me to accept that I am a normal guy. I just have difficulties which I need to challenge and overcome.
Now, Harvey, clearly there was a dream that you had. I think most of us in aviation have had that dream from a very young age. So tell us about the journey to Aerobility and how that got you into the cockpit.
That also was quite a complex journey. I actually had a phobia of flying from a young age to the point where I had to be medicated to even step foot on an aircraft which was parked at a museum. The turning point came after school when I was nominated to go away to Africa, and I hate saying I found myself because I was as unspiritual afterwards as I was before. But it really did open my eyes to pushing yourself personally. And I think I was asked a week before coming home how I was going to carry on that experience back in the UK. And learning to fly and overcoming this phobia seemed like the obvious option. And after being back here for a year or so, I decided it was time to challenge myself. And I must say, as soon as I went up and was rolling down the runway in my first flight in a light aircraft, I absolutely felt head over heels in love and haven't looked back since.
Oh, that's great, Harvey. And of course, I know Aerobility is part of your life now. You know, you started your journey on learning to fly, which resulted in you now becoming an employee of the charity. So tell us what you're up to at Blackbush when you're not flying.
So, yeah, Aerobility has become very quickly the centre of my universe because it is just a charity which gets into every bit of your life. The strapline, if I can fly, what else can I do? It's really part of what we do as a charity. So I made the decision to come and work for Aerobility as the aviation activity officer. and luckily passed my interview and now look after group bookings, experience days and flying days. But also I think the core of my role at Aerobility is running our 2 youth programs. A big part of what I wanted to do in the role is reach kids younger than I got involved with the charity, because I know if I got involved at a younger age, my life would be improved drastically from earlier on. So it's my privilege to run both the Junior Aspiring Pilots program, but also the Aviation Education program, which is really our bread and butter of what we do, giving confidence and transferable skills to young people.
No, very well said. And of course, that is only half of the story of what Aerobility does. You know, those outreach programs are absolutely critical. Now, of course, you're able to empathise with those kids going up in the air for the first time. Give us a view about first solo, Harvey, and then that journey through to getting your pilot's license. How did all that go? What were the challenges, I guess, is probably an interesting question.
Well, I guess the challenges of learning to fly were the same as they have always been. It's taking things that are difficult and finding a way to overcome them. So I think some of what I do in the cockpit isn't the standard things that you would expect a pilot to do, but they work and make things easier for me to safely fly an aeroplane. But the first solo was where it all hit home and became a really real aspiration for me. I know on the weeks and months of lead up to it, I was really nervous. But when you're sat there waiting to go, and it's only one circuit around the Blackbird circuit, it goes in a blink of an eye. There's almost no time to be scared. It's just get there and do your job. And then once you've landed, that incredible rush comes. But I think even today, since passing my skills test, jumping on a little bit, every time I'm up in the air, and especially if I'm flying with a family member, it's just an incredible rush. And I know that thinking about it, it's that really uncanny role reversal where you have people looking out for you your whole life and almost making decisions on your behalf. And suddenly you're sat there with your dad or your sister and people who have cared for you, and you're the one in charge and looking after them, which had a real impact on me.
Harvey, those are wonderful words, mate. They really are, and it's so lovely to have been a part of that journey with you. You know, having been with the charity for so long myself, and just seeing how people's lives are genuinely changed for the better. Harvey, you remain the poster boy. You've done an awesome job today. I look forward to seeing you again soon. But for now, Harvey, I'm going to leave you to your Sunday afternoon, and when we can all go flying again recreationally, I can't wait to get up in the air with you. So for now, Harvey, see you soon.
See you soon. Cheers, John.
Okay, well, that was Harvey. What a guy. He really does prove that anything is possible in terms of aviation, even with or without a disability. So we're now going to go to Australia. A couple of weeks ago, we got the opportunity to talk to a really interesting guy called Bob Delahunty. Now, Bob set up an organisation in New South Wales called the Historic Aircraft Restoration Society. He's president and chief pilot. He had the vision and was able to get the capital together to actually get vintage airliners and multi-engined aircraft into the air that otherwise we'd never have been able to fly again. So this is not small airplanes, this is big airplanes. Now, the queen of the fleet is a super Constellation, an aircraft which, you know, really redefined passenger air travel back in the 90s, in the 1950s and 60s. This was a pressurized aircraft, high speed, intercontinental. You know, it just revolutionized air travel just before the jet age. The aircraft in question we're going to see is one of a kind. Breitling did used to operate one, but I believe that's now no longer flying. So this is the only Super Constellation left in the air, and this is how Bob was able to tell us the story of that amazing restoration process and how it's flown at air shows in Australia.
Well, we are now going to go down under. We're going to Australia, and it's fantastic to have with us today at the Armchair Airshow, Bob Delahaye, President and Chief Pilot of an amazing organisation in New South Wales, Australia, the Historical Aircraft Restoration Society. So, Bob, welcome to the Armchair Airshow.
No, thanks very much. It's great to join this.
So, Bob, this is an incredible organisation you have. Tell us a bit about it, what aircraft you have, and do they display to the public?
Yeah, well, we've been going for 40 years, and I don't look that old, of course, but we started collecting bits and pieces of World War II memorabilia, which was unfortunately being scrapped all over the place, and we decided we better start saving that. So we built an organisation over time of passionate, determined enthusiasts to keep old aeroplanes in the public eye and fly them wherever possible. So in that period of time now, we've amassed over 60 aircraft, and we've got 700 volunteers, many of them airline people, engineers and pilots, many business people, down to housewives and their families. So it's a very family-orientated organisation.
Tell us the pioneering accomplishments of the design.
Well, Howard Hughes, the famous aviator, of course, he owned TWA Airlines, and he wanted an airliner that could go transcontinental, and he worked with Lockheed, and the Constellation came out of that. Flew first during World War II and didn't go into airlines straight away, went on to military operations. After World War II, they were used then in airline service. Our particular aircraft actually was a United States Air Force transport aircraft, and it was built in 1955, and it was the type that Qantas operated, our airline here in Australia, and it was about the closest thing we were ever going to get to it. It's a delightful aeroplane to fly. People say it's a hydraulic dinosaur because it's one of those early aircraft that had so much hydraulic systems within it, and it also had some very unique features, pressurization, power recovery turbines on the engines, which recovered some of the exhaust gases and fed them back in to increase the power. But as a crew aircraft, we typically fly with two flight engineers, a first officer and a second officer, as well as the captain. We all work as a team. We normally have an extra 2 crew members on board, plus lots of our members if we're going to an air show. And we are very pleased to have so many retired engineers from Qantas that grew up with their apprentices back in the 50s, that we're able to continue to maintain it. So from a pilot's point of view, it's a lovely aircraft to sit there. It's very stable. In fact, when I flew it back from the United States in 1996, there was one section between Honolulu and Pago Pago that I trimmed the aircraft out and didn't need to do anything for about 10 minutes. It just stayed beautiful on trim, on heading, on altitude without autopilot, and just did what every pilot would love an aeroplane to do. It's just perfectly balanced.
Absolutely. And tell us about the display. So, the crew composition, and how does she handle low level, in a bit more of a sprightly way of flying?
Yeah. Well, I had been flying our Neptune bomber in airshow displays before getting the Super Constellation. So effectively, it's the same display that we use for the Neptune bomber, and it's a stable type of display. It uses energy that the aircraft's generating in its forward motion rather than pulling it around into the display. But the process started, I guess, with the International Airshow at Avalon in the first year that we brought the aircraft to Australia, and they wanted us to do a night show. And so what I did was I used the Air Force Base at near Sydney to practice that night show, and Qantas were very keen to support us at the time. So they allowed me to use their 747 simulator. So we did a lot of stuff at night in the simulator to get around any issues that we might have. So the night show is effectively, people think that with all the glow coming out of the power recovery turbines, we're doing something special. Well, we're not. It's just the normal flames that come out that you don't see at daytime, but you're just seeing them at night time. So quite often I'll turn all the lights off the aircraft, so all it does is be lit up with all these flames. We set 52 inches of manifold pressure at the threshold, release the brakes, and at rotation speed, typically around about 100 knots, climb away 30 odd feet, gear up, do a 30-degree right-hand turn, climb to 500 feet, do a teardrop turn, come down the runway at 150 feet at about 230 knots, climb away, do those reverse turns, and often then come and do a missed approach at about 30 feet and climb away and come back and land. In all of that, we're talking to each other. We're coordinating very clearly how we are doing this. The throttles are effectively handled by the flight engineer. After the V1 speed is released, I take the hands off the throttle. Flight engineer handles the throttles from there. It's like calling down to a ship's engine room. You call all the power settings that you want. He's sitting in a bit of a hole there, doesn't know what you're doing, and has to be very comfortable with what you're doing, and it all works extremely well.
Yeah, and how was she received with the Australian public, and have you ever taken her out of Australia?
No, we haven't. We resisted doing that. It took so much to get it here. We've had invitations to go out of Australia, but it's such an iconic aircraft that we believe that we don't need to do that. We're showcasing it to Australian audiences, and people from overseas come to visit, to go through the aircraft, and they can come and watch the engineers working on it. They can watch us do engine runs, and the various events that we hold or go to, they can see us fly. So we really don't see it as being something that egos drive you overseas or money lures you to go overseas. We just want to keep it as now at the moment, the only flying super constellation in the world.
Well, Bob, I think this is just a fantastic business you have, and an opportunity to, allow the golden years of aviation to stay alive. So what you're doing in Australia is absolutely fantastic. So if you can't bring the aircraft to us, we should try and bring the people to you. So if there's any viewers who are going to be going to Australia in the next year or so, then you need to get down to Shell Harbour Regional Airport, I believe you're at, in New South Wales. And
just south of Sydney.
Righty-ho. Well, there's the invitation right there. So, Bob, thank you very much for giving us a really interesting insight into a beautiful aircraft. Thank you.
Our pleasure, and look forward to seeing you when you come down.
Wow, what a sound. I do remember the Constellation over in the UK a few years ago now doing the tour, and it's a sadly missed aircraft. So if any of you venture down to Australia, I'm sure Bob will happily receive you to see the airplane. So now we're going to go from 4 radials to 6 radials in formation. So we spoke with Jez Hopkinson, who is the team leader of the Yakovlevs air display team. Now, these guys are based down in Henstridge in Somerset, and they have been operating for about 18 years now, a fleet of Yak 50s and a Super Yak 52, not only around the UK air display circuit, but actually across the world. It's an amazing brand. What they do is fantastic for the UK airshow industry. They've been all over the place, and the aircraft that they fly are really quite iconic. These aircraft were behind the Iron Curtain for many years. The Yak 50 is an aircraft that first flew in 1973 with the principal objective of winning the World Aerobatic Championships, and it did so a couple of years later. The team is led by a Super Yak 52 with a two-seater version of the airplane, and I caught up with Jez to find out about that team and also about a unique addition to his business, which is skywriting. Take a look. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to Jez Hopkinson from the Yakovlevs. How are you doing, Jez?
Good, thanks, John. Good to be here. Thanks very much for having me on the show. Looking forward to it.
Now, you are, like myself, a man who loves Russian radials. I've been flying my Yak now for about 15 years. It's a real pleasure to fly. It's an honest aeroplane. It's a strong and fully aerobatic aeroplane. But you've set up a flying display team called the Yakovlevs. Give us some background about the team, how you formed it, and actually why did you decide to form the team?
Well, I think a bit like yourself, Yaks are amazing aircraft. You get a lot of power and aircraft for your buck. They're powerful, they're sexy, and they're mini Warbirds, especially the Yak 50 single-seater. But I bought my first one in about 1993, 94. And very quickly, there seemed to be a community of people that wanted to do formation flying. I was based at Compton Abyss, and from about 95, everybody used to get together at Compton and at North Weald. And the team basically developed from there. We got together and did lots of flying with like-minded people. In about 1999, we did our first four-ship display as a professional team at Yeovilton, Royal Navy Air Station, Yeovilton, and since then it's a bit of history. We just kept on going. It's been great fun.
Now we can see some brilliant pictures here in cockpit of the team flying in formation. Just give us a little bit of a sense about what it requires to fly in such close proximity to another aircraft. I mean, it's obviously no autopilot. It's purely done, by your hands and your eyes and your feet. So put us in the cockpit, Jez. What are you doing right here now in line astern?
I mean, believe it or not, it's all about practice, and more practice, and then some more practice. And above all, it's a mental approach. You have to be calm. Everything is slow, methodical, complete trust in your other pilots. Having flown together with them all the time, you get very used to being around them. But it's all about control, slowing everything down. And for ourselves, our mantra is really make the easy look good.
No, absolutely, and of course that comes to practice and training, as you say. So in terms of the work up to these displays that you get involved with, what sort of time does that require for you to actually put on the show and get the CAA to give you your permission to go and display in front of the public? What does that involve?
Well, every year we change the display a little bit. It's modular, so we can pull bits out, put them back in quite easily. And we tend to come up with the ideas throughout the previous season and then towards the end of the season, so that when we're ready for the new season, we've already got them formulated, and we would have probably just started practicing. So I'll nip up with a number 2, and we'll go off and practice a new maneuver. And if we like it, we'll incorporate it and practice as a 2, then a 3, then a 4, then a 6 ship. And that can take anything from 3 weeks to 5 weeks, depending on the Great British weather and how different the new display is. Going from a 4 ship to a 6 ship, which we did in 2017, was a quantum leap forward, a lot harder than I expected it to be. And so that took us about 6 weeks before we were ready, just by getting used to having so many more aircraft in the air at the same time and knowing where everyone is.
No, absolutely, and we're just seeing a fantastic loop there in a big aero formation. Now, you say the Yak is a powerful airplane, but of course when you're all together in formation, it's all about excess power, lead and lag. Now, the guys on the outside, I assume, are going to be working particularly hard, because it's those guys that really need all the power they can get and all the anticipation they can get. Just tell us a little bit about how difficult those positions are in the formation.
Well, our numbers 4 and number 5, which are on the echelons outboard, they do work a lot harder. anytime we're out of the looping phase, so just going straight up and down, which isn't too bad, it's the rolling that's the problem, where the inboard section is pulling more G and the outer is pulling less G, and the circumference is a lot more on one of them. So that's where you really do need the power. But our outboard guys, they have the two most powerful aircraft. They have very, very big engines, super lightweight aircraft. And so they do have the ability to be able to stay in formation. We're also working the power within the box section of the display as well. So there's a lot of coordination. And as I said, without giving too many secrets away, we basically just make the easy just look good by practicing and making sure we're tight.
So Jez, thank you for sharing with us your passion. I think it's a passion that we all enjoy, whether we're in the cockpit or watching you at air shows. So thanks for bringing us the Yakovlevs for so many years, and we wish you all the best for many more years to come. Thanks for coming along today.
Thanks very much, John. I'm sure your show will be absolutely fantastic.
Thanks a lot. Well, there you go. That was a great chat with Jez Hopkinson there, putting us all into the cockpit. Now, I did talk about, at the top of that, the sky typing. You'll notice we're 45 minutes over the original planned time. We still have a lot of footage that we're going to put into a show. More to come on this, but in the winter time we have a plan up our sleeves. So you can see more about Jez's sky typing work in those yaks if you take a look at the original Armchair Airshow we broadcast 2 weeks ago. Okay, we are almost there. Now, at the Armchair Airshow 2 weeks ago, we saw some incredible footage and had an amazing interview with NASA Space Shuttle Commander Chris Ferguson and also NASA Launch Director Mike Lineback on what it's like to ride a space shuttle into orbit. Now, Plan A was to actually show that shuttle coming back into the Earth's atmosphere and then Chris talking us through the landing. But we couldn't do that, so we've saved that for today. Now, ironically, in the shuttle program, it would have flown about 2 weeks. So we're 2 weeks on, so it's time for Chris and his crew to come back. But before I do that, I want to bring in Mike Miller-Smith, Chief Executive of Aerobility. You've seen Mike throughout today. Mike, how's the show been to you?
Wow, what a fabulous show. Everyone seemed really relaxed. It's amazing footage. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I remembered to do my fly 5 to 70490. And thank you, everyone, for doing the same if you haven't done already.
No, it's and that's why we're all here, of course. We are one of a kind. We've managed to attract some real interest because I think a lot of aviators want to put something back into what has offered them such joy and happiness in their aviating career. Now, talking about joy and happiness, one of the things that Mike and I also enjoy is space geekery. We are two self-confessed space geeks, and of course, when we had the chance to spend some really good times with Chris Ferguson and Mike Lineback offline, we really got to get some real insights into what those guys did in their NASA careers. Now, what a lot of you may not know is that Chris Ferguson has actually changed jobs. He's now working for Boeing, and he'll be the test pilot for the first crewed Boeing Starliner mission, which is set for launch at the end of this year. So you can see a lot more about Chris's upcoming plans to return to space as he does so on the Boeing Starliner. But Mike, I mean, that hour we had with Chris and Mike was memorable, wasn't it?
Absolutely. People that know me know that I joke about aerobability moments. It's a real privilege to do what I do, to be part of the aerobability family. But every now and again, you just do things where you have to pinch yourself. Talking to Chris Ferguson and to Mike Lineback was very much one of those amazing aerobability moments that I'll treasure forever.
Yeah, and of course our hangar at Blackbush was dedicated by Buzz Aldrin, and Buzz Aldrin, remains our patron, the Apollo 11 astronaut, the second man on the moon, and we talk about inspiration. I mean, he really did, raise the bar in terms of what we were able to deliver in terms of our services to disabled people. So, really, really memorable times there for the charity. I want to come on to some thanks before we make the final introduction to the last item. it would be remiss of me not to thank my co-hosts. I feel a bit responsible for making them take up what ended up being many hours of time away from their families to put this together. And of course, I'm talking about Lingy and George Smoky Bacon. They really have put in a huge amount of effort. So I want to say a huge thank you, not only from myself, but from everybody at the charity. Also, Ian, I think your stewardship of this has been absolutely phenomenal, and I do implore everyone to tune in to Planes TV. You'll see Ian around the air shows with his trademark black T-shirt and white Planes TV logo. But I also want to talk about some other friends that the charity has, which is Chris and Charles, and they were able to bring in some participants that we could never have hoped for, and of course Dave Walton as well from TSA Consulting, some of those big players in the UK airshow industry, but also Pete Walker from Wonderland PA, Abby Singleton as well, have given their time freely to project to you this Armchair Airshow. And of course the marketing, I'd like to say, has been absolutely phenomenal. We've been right up there with some of the big players, so that has been awesome. But I want to say my last thanks to you, Mike, for once again, being the person at the head of the spear, coming up with the plan, coming up with the idea, and continuing to move Aerobility into pastures new. I'm so excited to see what this charity can deliver in the next 25 years. We recently celebrated our 25th anniversary. So, Mike, I want to doff my hat to you. It's been an awesome journey so far.
Well, thank you, John. Well, as ever, a real team effort. If I could do a couple of quick shout-outs to the Aerobility team, Claire, Marcus, Chad, Laura, Peter and Abby, thank you so much for working so hard on this. And together, through this crazy idea of the Armchair Airshow, we've raised enough money to see the charity to the end of the year and beyond, and also to provide introductory flights for over 300 disabled people. So we've had some fun, we've enjoyed it. A great team as ever. It's all about the people that we help at the end of the day. It's not about us, it's about those smiles on faces. When somebody takes to the air for the first time and you see that airplane door open, that smile on the face, as somebody realises that, I can do this, I can fly. That's just brilliant thing to be part of. So thank you, everybody. And without further ado, let's go back into orbit. Let's bring this space shuttle into land. Thank you, everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the show. And, we'll see you online soon with an Aerobility event, but hopefully face-to-face when life returns to normal. And as John alluded to, we look forward to bringing you back the Armchair Airshow in the future. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the show. And God bless. Take care.
Well, Chris and his crew have now flown around the world about 2.5 times, but it's time to come home. So we've now got an incredible piece of footage here to show you guys on what it's like to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and bring the shuttle in for a landing. So Chris, we're back with you again. Talk us through what you're doing in the cabin and what's occupying your mind now as you're ready for re-entry.
Sure, John. So it's it's an exciting time.
On at the 180.
With a little luck, you've managed to successfly complete your mission, and you're getting geared up to return back. The preparations begin hours in advance, really. You have to sort of stow the cabin, make sure all the gear is put away. It's essentially transform the orbiter from a trailer that you were living in for the last couple months until back into an airplane that'll re-enter the atmosphere. The deorbit burn is pretty benign. It's obviously an important burn. You have to get it just right in order to meet your target, which is about a half a world away. I think on the STS-126, which is this video here, we actually did our deorbit burn at night, and a lot of our re-entry was in the evening, which is actually very exciting because you have an opportunity to see this plasma envelop the orbiter at about Mach 20. And it just looks like what I'd call is a pink cloud that you can just not even see through. It's a little intimidating because you realize that outside it's about 2,000 degrees. But you're all still comfortably nestled in your cockpit. One of the recollections I have is as we were getting closer was sense of speed. You know, when you're up at 250, 300 miles, it's sort of hard to realize how fast you're going. But as you get closer to the Earth, you begin to sense speed. You can look down at the clouds. And I recall seeing the Channel Islands for the first time. This approaches to Edwards Air Force Base. So we were coming in from a south west to sort of northeast trajectory. We saw the Channel Islands. I looked a little beyond. I could see Los Angeles. You can actually see from San Francisco down to down to Baja, Mexico. And we were making this approach to runway 4 at the Edwards Air Force Base, which was a runway that was not very much used. We usually landed on runway 22, but the seasonal winds had us landing on runway 4, which meant what they call a very big heading alignment cone. It was a 360-degree turn right overhead the field. You enter that turn at about Mach 1 at about 65,000 feet, and spend the next 4 minutes or so just slowing down and turning to line yourself up with the runway. You can see it was just a gorgeous day there. And this is actually the very first landing that occurred on this particular runway. NASA had never really anticipated a landing at Edwards Air Force Base while they were going through a major runway construction, but they had shut down the historic runway 422 at Edwards that all those famous flights had been conducted off of, and built a temporary runway, if you can believe there is such a thing, next to 422 that was significantly shorter. It was 12,000 feet versus the 15,000 feet that we were used to. It was also narrower. I believe 422 was 200 feet wide, 250 feet wide. This runway was 150 feet wide. So it actually, you know, to us looked a lot smaller than anything we had ever practiced on before. The approach was uneventful. It was a high density altitude day. Of course, Edwards is up there around 2,200 feet to begin with. And then the high density altitude gave us a much higher ground speed at touchdown than I think we had seen. And the combination of that, the calm winds, relatively calm winds, and the shorter runway really surprised me. I was always used to, as soon as the nose gear touches down, looking out at the runway remaining markers and seeing about 7,000 feet, 8,000 feet remaining. In this case, there was less than 4,000 feet remaining, so I sort of had to jump on the brakes. But we stopped in plenty of time.
Now, you get one shot at this. So how do you practice for that final approach?
Well, there was a research airplane called the STA, Shuttle Training Airplane. It was a highly modified Gulfstream 2, and it was modified to fly like the space shuttle. There's not many planes that have a drag coefficient as high as the space shuttle, so they had to improvise very creatively and employ, I think, the first ever use of in-flight thrust reversing. So this G2 was able to deploy its thrust reversers on approach to give it that glide ratio that the shuttle had, which was horrible. And you got plenty of opportunities, about 8 passes per practice session. They wouldn't let you land the space shuttle until you had flown 1,000 practice passes in this STA. But it was very, very realistic. I would be lying if I told you that I could tell the difference between landing the space shuttle and landing the shuttle training airplane. So that's how we got the preponderance of our practice prior to these approaches.
Right, and obviously, as you get into the denser air, you know, the shuttle turns into this atmospheric airplane. So how does that work? How do you transition from an orbiter to a glider, and what effect does that have on you as the pilot, but obviously more importantly the instrumentation that you can see?
So that's a great question. There are what we had was a DAP, which is a digital autopilot, and that interesting transition between jet-borne flight, in other words, the reaction control jets that would steer the vehicle and cause it to move. That transition happened very gradually as the air got thicker and thicker as you descended, and you eventually, by about Mach 5 on reentry, you transition completely away from jet augmented flight, where you actually had the reaction jets rolling the airplane, yawing the airplane, making sure the nose stayed pointed forward. And down around Mach 5, the air was dense enough to allow the flight control surfaces, the elevons, ailerons, and the vertical tail, keep the nose pointed forward. And it was about that time, Mach 5, that you actually you deployed the pitot tubes that sensed the dynamic pressure. And then that dynamic pressure was also fed into the flight control system that allowed the vehicle to make that slow, gradual, the positive transformation from what they call the aero jet DAP, jet-borne flight, down to airborne flight control. So it was a gradual transformation, but it was very positive, and you could tell by the time you got down around Mach 1.5, you could sense what they called the rocky road, a little bit of vibration and shuddering as the vehicle went transonic. And then down below about Mach 1, you began to pick up sort of that sensation, that buffeting feeling of airflow around you. And because you had just come back from space for a couple of weeks, you were sort of very sensitized to any sort of vibration or motion. So it was a very positive transformation, just from a sensory perspective for the crew as well.
Yeah, of course. And in terms of having to look at contingency, I mean, you have a plan to return to the base that you had you have on the flight plan. But what contingencies did you have in case for some reason the runway was blocked, or you had to find somewhere else, or was that decision made way beforehand prior to the deorbit burn?
Yeah, once the deorbit burn occurs, you're pretty much committed. There are few options at that point. Early on in the program, they investigated sort of a divert, like if I had to go someplace else, could I go someplace else? And we focused our energy instead in making absolutely positively sure that the prime field was going to be available. Of course, weather was one of those big concerns. You really had to predict the weather about 15 minutes before the deorbit burn, or about an hour prior to landing, and be reasonably sure that you were not going to get sucked in by fog. In the case of takeoffs and landings, they forbid all takeoffs and landings 3 hours in advance of the deorbit burn, just to make sure that there would be nothing that would go wrong that would compromise the landing field. Of course, just as in most major commercial airports, everything was backed up by emergency generators. There was really nothing left to chance. There was primaries and backups for every major system that would bring you into land. So once that deorbit burn was performed, you were essentially committed to the field that you performed the burn to. Very little to no opportunity to go elsewhere.
Yeah, fascinating insights, Chris. They really are. And, one of the things that must have weighed heavily on your mind prior to that final shuttle landing of STS-135 is what that meant to people who'd had an entire career at NASA, the 30-year shuttle program. What did that feel like when you came to wheel stop back at Kennedy Space Center, that morning?
Well, the four of us on board, I mean, I think I can speak for all of us, is we were truly humbled just to be a part of it. A lot of us had not been around through the first half of the shuttle's life, but some of the talented individuals who had worked shuttle from day one. I'm not sure if Mike was there from the very beginning, Mike Leinbach, but there were several who made an entire career out of the shuttle. When we lost them, and particularly noteworthy for me, when we lost Columbia, obviously a lot of them had taken that very, very personally. And we did try, the best we could to recognize the fact that, it certainly was, it had a lot to do with the astronauts, but it wasn't really about the astronauts that had the opportunity to fly them. And I think we did take whatever means necessary to recognize the fact that the shuttle was by far a tremendous success to our exploration of space, the construction of the International Space Station, the deployment of many scientific probes and interplanetary research mechanisms. But it was a somber moment for everybody. I think they were happy that they brought it to a very successful conclusion, but at the same time, it was very bittersweet. And of course, a lot of people who had worked the program for their entire lives, they knew that the day the shuttle landed was probably the end of their spacefaring career, and we try to recognize that as well.
Well, what a superb way to bring to close the Aerobility Armchair Airshow. That was our final flying element, and you can't do much better than the space shuttle coming to land, can you? Fantastic stuff. And it's a chance, I suppose, for me to say thank you to John and Mike for getting me involved. An incredible project. And if you'd like to see more of these, as I would, at the Armchair Airshow, I think throw a $5 at the charity wouldn't be a bad idea. Don't forget you can text FLY5 to 70490, and that will donate £5, and you can see the rest of the terms there. I will try not to read them out because I'm juggling far too much already, but a wonderful way to support the charity. And if they do well out of this, who knows, maybe we'll see an Armchair Airshow Mark 3. Are we up to now? Superb stuff. And let's see now a little reminder of what that charity is all about and the wonderful work that it does.
Aerobility exists to help disabled people change their lives through the magic of flight. Whatever the disability, whether it's a young person with autism or a wounded soldier, perhaps somebody with Alzheimer's even, or an acquired disability or medical condition, we give everybody the chance to participate and to fly with our specially adapted aircraft and equipment such as the hoist, which can safely lift somebody into the pilot seat to take the controls for the first time.
The one thing that's fantastic about Aerobility is the way that there is no difference between people who are disabled and those that are non-disabled.
When I'm up there, just another voice on the radio, and that's all I want to be, just another voice. And Aerobility has enabled that completely.
They gave me that purpose back, they gave me that sense of worth again, and for that I'm forever thankful.
Time is tough for everybody right now, but if you can help, please do. Through your support, we can continue to change lives and support disabled people through the magic of flight. Thank you.
I am happier.
I am more confident.
I am feeling positive about my life.
Thanks to Aerobility.
And thank you to you.
And one more reminder now about the lottery, which is also available to you. Superb stuff. Do go and check that out, and yes, support the charity in any way that you can. That brings us to a close. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Armchair Airshow Mark II Unseen, and as I say, do support the charity where you can, and make sure you tell them you heard about it via the Armchair Airshow. I'd love to do another one of these, and keep your ear to the ground on that one. Thanks again. Bye bye.